Karen, a young girl, waits by the gate and stares at a bush packed with white flowers, and she grins, telling her older brother, "Aren't they pretty?" He nods right away. Then he leans down and carefully plucks one blossom from its stem with gentle fingers. She slips the flower into Karen's blonde hair like it was made for her, then looks up with a blush spreading across her cheeks and thanks her, eyes locked on her. As one lone petal drifts down from another flower, Karen's face flips into worry. Right away, her brother clocks it and demands to know what's wrong. He blurts out that picking the flower probably hurt it. Then her brother panics when he realizes he messed up. He quickly tells her it's not her fault at all, and deep down he thinks, good, this is a great sign, because Karen is on a path to becoming a genuinely kind person. The boy yanks his sister into a warm, crushing hug, while ethereal visions swirl around them. The stern, dark-haired man, the blue-haired maid, and that girl with animal ears, and in the silence he swears he'll break the future written for her. Then the truth slams in. He's been reincarnated into a game world as the villain's older brother, the one doomed to die. But now he's drowning in power and he vows to protect his little sister, steer her away from that fate and rewrite everything. Dean shatters, dark-haired and barely breathing, snaps awake, his face twisted like he's just been ripped out of an insane, powerful dream. He rubs his eyes, and the quick flashes finally click into place as memories from a past life. Then it hits him hard, his then-girlfriend demanding to know who mattered more, his sister or her, insisting it was some request from his parents. He'd seen the scam for what it was, called her out, and told her they should break up. And yeah, he remembers his family as warm and loving. Until a note on the whiteboard screams the truth. His parents' brutal work schedules keep them away until late at night. With them gone, he had to step in, and that meant non-stop care for his sickly little sister, like when he sat by her fevered bed, coaxing her to take a bite of those carrots at dinner. This was his life, every single day. She remembers how just holding her little hand in his can feel so safe, like the world finally slows down. The past spills straight into the present as he swings inside with groceries in hand, declaring, "I'm making dinner." From the couch, his sister coughs out a weak little sound, asks for a drink, then catches herself and begs for a special blend of hot tea. He doesn't hesitate and gives her exactly what she wants. He bursts in to find his sister sprawled on the couch, glued to the fight scenes of that familiar game. And she proudly says she's playing through Orca-kun's route. So he begs her to stop slapping her own pain onto everything she does. He reaches out and brushes her forehead, and instantly his gut drops because she's burning up with a fever. He snaps, "That's enough games," and orders her back to her room to sleep, but she won't back down. She insists she's already decided to finish the character's route all the way through today. He lets out a defeated sigh. No choice left, then grabs the controller and takes over for her while she flops onto the couch to watch, and she swears it's the perfect compromise. While he's playing, his sister leans in and asks if he's into characters like the villain Caroline. He shrugs and says he doesn't see a villain. He sees someone pitiful, someone nobody ever loved. On the screen, Caroline spits out her final cries over her defeat, then she dies. His sister murmurs that death was the quiet kind that leaves you staring. Her voice slices through the game noise, and she murmurs that she'll probably bail mid-game from his life too. Then he whips around, stunned, and demands she stop saying things like that. He tries to swat her grim words away with a joke, saying that someday, when she brings a boyfriend home, he'll be the one who tests him first, only for her to weakly push back that job belongs to her father. A sweet little moment gets snatched away by grim reality. At the hospital, his sister Nanami lies under an oxygen mask, and in force she leans into the silence, apologizing for being his problem her whole life before thanking him. Breaking down, he squeezes her hand, sobbing her name, and swears she never bothered him a day in her life. Her words hit the air for the last time. He sat hunched beside her hospital bed, staring at her now still body beneath a white sheet. Right then, his sister's life finally slipped away. The hospital room silence gets ripped open by a sudden, razor-sharp ring from the phone. The call didn't just hurt, It shattered him. A voice on the other end told him his parents were gone in a car crash. The police said they'd been driving like maniacs, desperate to reach their daughter before her final breath. And when it was all over, he stood alone in the rain, right there by their graves. After his sister and parents died suddenly, terror of losing anyone else swallowed him whole. So he stopped building real connections, shut himself away in quiet isolation, and all that filled the silence was the steady tapping of his keyboard. Just as he was locked in alone with his work, a colleague suddenly grabbed him from behind and demanded he come along for a company drinking night. He tried to shut it down, saying he was tied up, but the guy wouldn't budge, going as far as warning that management would be furious if he skipped. At the restaurant, Anzakin proudly held up a picture of his brand new baby, and the whole room shifted to him until another coworker nudged Satu and asked if he was married or had a girlfriend. Then Satu just sighed and admitted his last girlfriend was back in university. Then she launched a matchmaker mission, pointing out the young woman sitting at their table and pushing Anzakin to try a simple date with her, since, during lunch, she'd already clocked him as attractive and wanted to test their vibe. The moment he went along, the other woman blushed hard, totally overwhelmed by the sudden spotlight. He finally got what that little gathering was really fishing for. Then he politely shot it down, saying he wasn't there for romance, not right now. The woman apologized for pressing him, and he just told her the truth. Chances are, plenty of people out there would fit her way better than he ever could. The whole interaction stung like he'd been jabbed by 1,000 tiny needles. So that night, alone on the walk home through the city, he doubled down on his solitude, grabbed something from a convenience store and headed straight back. The second he stepped into the crosswalk, a wall of blinding headlights slammed toward him, and in that last heartbeat he finally understood. His life was done. The strangest part. He felt relief because he was thankful he'd turned down that girl, sparing her the heartbreak of losing him. His senses snapped back, but not into the world he knew. He'd been reborn as a baby. Panic and rage mixed in his chest as he wondered if this was some divine punishment for making that woman cry. Then he looked around and saw he was sprawled in a massive, fancy room while a voice boomed, "It's time for Lord Zex to have his milk." He jerked in shock when a maid started feeding him from a bottle, and the whole room, outfits included, screamed not his world. Yet she still talked in Japanese, which made him realize with a sick twist that this was still Japan. He just somehow got the worst end of the deal. Lying in the crib, he wrestled with this brand new reality. 2 caretakers hovered over him, and he knew deep down neither one was his mother. Then the maid's voice snapped through the air, barking at the dazed kid to hurry up and finish the bottle. He caught the maid's whispers, roasting him as a pitiful, creepy kid who never cried or laughed. Then they gawked at his white hair and guessed it meant he was somehow colorless. And even though he couldn't see, every word still hit him, making him wonder what that label really meant. The second it hit him, he realized the truth. This wasn't care at all. It was just feeding and baths and diaper changes, while everyone ignored him completely. He knew this was a trap from the inside. He was 27, and he still remembered that grim Middle Ages experiment. Babies who were left without affection didn't make it past their first year. That gut punch hit, and his resolve hardened. Because the pain from his past life still haunted him, and he refused to let that kind of heartbreak sink its teeth into him again. So he chose to stay detached from the very start. That decision got slammed right away, because 1 second later he's staring at a maid holding out a newborn baby to him, and she's calling it beautiful, saying, "This is your sister." That single sentence hit him like a punch to the gut, and in that instant he was certain he didn't want a sister. The shock hit even harder the moment his mother and father stepped into the room like they'd aged overnight. She looked at him, and he couldn't believe how far she'd fallen for time, while his stern-faced dad just barked at the maid that she'd done enough. Then they cooed over his brand new sister, calling her cute, and it all smashed into him at once. Wait, these were his parents. That calm moment exploded when the baby in the crib screamed a piercing wail, and Zex felt it hit him like it was way too loud. His parents weren't impressed at all. His mother huffed that Caroline was crying again, calling her a noisy brat, while his father just said they should head out for tea, and she agreed without a fight. With that, they spun around and stormed out, the door slamming shut as the echo rattled the room, while Zex just stood there, completely frozen, not believing a word of it. He snapped out of his stupor, bolted for the door, and hammered it with his tiny fists. Still, he couldn't wrap his head around it. They were really about to leave a baby alone like this. He peeks from behind the wall and eavesdrops as two servants mutter about their duties, confirming Lord Zex and Lady Caroline are already fed, so they don't have to change their diapers yet. Then they shrug and decide to walk away, leaving the kids alone, while the toddler's mind simmers with silent fury, screaming for them to do their jobs. Frustration slams into him inside the nursery. His sister shrieks from her crib, and he tries to wave it off, telling himself it's not his problem, while the whole room is strewn with broken, abandoned building blocks. He studies the entertainment like it disgusts him, snatches up a picture book, and snaps when he realizes the words are in Japanese, an ugly leftover from his old life. Then he eyes the building blocks, baffled by whatever twisted obsession a man with a 28-year-old mind could have. His hunt for a real distraction fizzles out with a heavy sigh, and all he's left holding is a plain, helpless baby rat. He creeps up to the crib and, with hands trembling, offers the rattle to Caroline. Her big teary eyes lock onto him, and her crying fizzles for a second. Her silence snaps his patience like a rubber band. So with one hard motion, he hurls the rattle straight at her head, convinced he's done with this and she can keep crying on her own, until the smack makes the baby scream again, louder than before. He spins away, fighting the noise so he can drown it out with his book, muttering that it's none of his business. But then he flicks his eyes to the clock on the dresser, and bam, it hits him. It's way past time for Caroline's milk. The realization hits and he springs into action, toddling to the door and hammering it with non-stop knocks. Then he hears the staff snicker from the other side, saying Lord Zex is just playing. And that's when his stomach drops. They aren't missing him at all. They're doing it on purpose. Is he seriously going to ignore the knocking? He spots a bell's pull cord meant to summon servants, and panic drives him into a running leap. He stretches with every ounce of strength to grab it, but his little body comes up short, and he slams into the floor with a sharp cry. Suddenly, the door blasts open, and there stands his dark-haired gaze. Zex lurches to his feet, jabbing a finger at his sister as he yells for milk. The maid blinks in shock, rushes to the crib and snatches up the crying Caroline, while Zex just stares, arms crossed, seething with frustration. He watches as the maid, fresh off feeding his sister, declares she's leaving, while for a brief moment Caroline goes still, sipping quietly from his body. His relief lasts half a heartbeat, then a horrifying truth slams into him, crystal clear. The diapers. Reluctantly finishing the task, he glances at Caroline in her crib, and there she is, full belly, spotless diaper, cooing away like she's got the best news ever. He snaps his head away hard, a scowl blazing across his face, then tells himself over and over that this was a total one-off, because he only stepped in to help when her crying started getting on his nerves. He keeps waiting for help, but the neglect drags on with zero sign of it stopping. So here he is again, tending to his sleeping sister. He flips open a lullaby book and tries to follow the strange lyrics, but the words don't make sense. So he just resigns himself and changes her diaper one more time. He keeps flipping through the picture book, calling out the sounds of a radish and a carrot. And just when he thinks it'll fall flat, Caroline kicks her feet in pure delight, hooked on every word. Time flies. Caroline is a toddler now, building with blocks, and somehow she hauls herself up to sit straight all on her own. He lights up and praises her like she's truly amazing. Proud as fireworks, she scoops up one lone block and thrusts it into his hands. He takes the tiny gift with a warm, sincere smile and thanks her. Then Caroline's grin lights up, her joy matching his. Right when the vibe finally turns sweet, the maid bursts in out of nowhere. She snaps that this room is for children, not for him. Then she crumples into a wild, bizarre tantrum, shrieking that she's bored and that babysitting him is the only thing that entertains her. Meanwhile, the two kids just stare, completely frozen in shocked silence. He blurts out an apology to his sister on the spot, even as she's still shaken by the maid's loud outburst. Later, sprawled in his bed, he groans and curses his bad luck, because that maid kept screaming and throwing tantrums until she finally got her fill. Heat crashes over him, and panic hits as he realizes he's running a fever, probably the flu, something contagious, and his only thought is Caroline, sleeping right there in her crib, so he has to stop himself from passing it to her. He stumbles up, pounds on a door for help, and boom, the dark-haired maid and a stern black-haired man open it. Zex blurts that he's running a fever and if they stay in the same room, Caroline will catch it too. The man won't allow a room change without the Lord's say-so, but he promises he'll push for a doctor. Fed up with the red tape, he rips off the act of being a kid and snaps, "At least move my bed as far from Caroline as you can." The guy blinks in shock, then agrees. As he heads over to take care of Caroline, the maid leans in and whispers that Zex talks just like a grown adult, despite being only 1 year old, which freaks her out so badly she wonders if he's possessed or cursed, while Zex is left alone, watching in silence. He flopped into his bed, moved somewhere new, and stared at the ceiling, realizing he'd royally screwed up, and that maybe growing up isn't optional after all. Fever claws into his head and his whole body aches like it's breaking apart, and deep down he remembers. This is just like when he was a kid in his previous life. The memory sharpens, and every time he had a fever back then, Nanami, his sister, never left his side. Lost in a dizzy haze, he hears desperate sobs clawing through the darkness. He blurts out his sister Nanami's name, stunned by how brutally someone down there is crying. He reaches through his fever haze, and his past self swears, right there in the moment, that her big brother will stay by her side, begging her to stop crying as the tears keep falling. The dream slips away as he stirs in bed, and even with his fever roaring, a faint, distant cry claws at his mind. He remembers they hauled him into this room, terrified his sickness might spread, and desperate to keep him far from Caroline. The noise swells louder, and he finally recognizes it's her, Caroline, across the room, standing in her crib with tears pouring down her face as she chokes out, "In an eye, in an eye." His eyes bulge with shock, and that sound slices right through the thick haze of sickness. He jolts at the realization. She's calling for him, her brother. It's the first time Caroline has ever said it, and that sudden tenderness hits him hard, because he'd been sure his care for her came only from necessity. Panic hits like a thunderclap when he sees her straining to climb out of the crib. No, not that. He yells, shakes himself into motion, swings his legs over the bed, but his strength gives out, and he slams to the floor, trembling and breathless. She makes it to him safe and sound, and he yanks her into a desperate embrace, whispering her name like a prayer, so relieved she's unhurt that it hits him all at once. But the strain is brutal, and his eyes start to glaze as his body finally gives out, slumping over into fading consciousness. Caroline snaps her gaze down at him, head tilted in pure confusion, and softly calls his name again as he lies still on the cold floor. After a beat of awkward silence, she gently taps his back, like a kid trying to soothe him the only way she knows. With her brother still not responding, she refuses to let him out of her sight, huddling against his back, and then she slips into sleep right there on the floor beside him. She curled up on the floor right beside her brother, breathing deep, while golden sunlight poured in through the window and painted the whole quiet room in warm light. He jolted awake, mind clearing in a rush, touched his own forehead, and froze when he realized his fever was gone, his body suddenly feeling strong again. Did he pass out? Panic hit hard as he scanned the room for Caroline and found her sleeping peacefully right beside him. He watched her stir, and a soft little sound slipped out of her lips. Then he leaned in and greeted her. "Good morning, Caroline." For a split second, he wondered if she'd stay close out of worry, but he shut that thought down fast, reminding himself she was only 8 months old. Her eyes snapped open, a burst of joy flashing across her face as she called out, "An eye." Then Zek's gaze went wide with pure shock. He'd sworn to keep everyone out of his world forever, but he couldn't deny what he'd just heard. His hands gripped the nightshirt tight and a chill hit him. This bond wasn't something he could stop now. She was his sister, and that was only the beginning. Choked with emotion, he yanked her into a crushing hug, and then he faced the truth, telling her, "Yeah, Caroline, I'm your older brother, and you're my precious sister." Sometime later, the two stood in the family library again, older, sharper, and ready for answers. Zex, all dressed up in his formal attire, swept his eyes over the shelves and asked his sister what she wanted to read today. Caroline hummed to herself, staring into that massive sea of books like it held a secret. She yanked a huge, fancy old book off the lower shelf like she couldn't wait a second longer. Then she thrust it into his hands and squealed that it was called Asterisk, the Legend of the Holy Empire. Zex nodded, told her to sit down, and started reading it to her. He started reading the tale out loud, about when the Demon King slammed into the final frontier, and just as hope was slipping away, a voice roared back that they wouldn't be defeated. It was Xian, the hero, standing right beside the saintess, Kazara. As he read, Caroline snapped her gaze up at him and blurted his name, and he froze mid-sentence, asking what was wrong, only for her to brush it off with, "Nothing." Inside, he let out a quiet sigh, thinking it was just a run-of-the-mill fairy tale for a picture book. He kept reading the fairy tale names out loud: Hero Xian, Saintess Kazara, while his sister echoed them back with a worried, questioning tone. Those names detonated a terrifying truth in his mind. This world was the exact game he'd lived in before. He stared down at his sister like he'd finally opened his eyes. Caroline Flammerl Ui Seraphornata. Golden hair, scarlet eyes. No mistake, she was ripped straight out of that game. That blow crashed into him, so hard his mind flashed back to the life he'd left behind. Hunched over a glowing screen, losing in a furious rage to a so-called low-level opponent, and now realizing another plan had just collapsed on him again. He tortured himself over a strategy, replaying that old theory. If the capture target stayed near Caroline, more survival routes would open up and success would spike. But the truth hit him hard. Even that was a dead end. His razor-sharp focus got ripped apart when his sister, Nanami, stumbled into the doorway wrapped in a blanket, and she demanded to know why he was still awake. He just muttered that he was thirsty. Then she glanced at the screen like, for real, was there any route left at all? She clocked how long he'd been locked on that game, then asked if he was really that into it, because he was clearly going nowhere. Next, she snapped, "Enough staring, sleep," and he nodded in silence, whispering a quiet good night as she headed off. Alone again, his mind snapped back to the real reason he was doing all this, and it was because of what Nanami said. He wasn't just playing, he was chasing one selfish goal, hunting for a way to keep her right there beside him. But that kind of survival route for Caroline, something that could even exist in the game, never showed up. And in his real life, that last flicker of hope died too, because his sister was the one fate took. That crushing failure slammed into his chest the moment it hit him again. He gagged, nausea flooding his body. Not again. He stared at the girl in front of him, and the truth snapped into place like a knife. The sweet sister he loved is the one fated to die, and she's the villain. Still reeling from the shock, Caroline, unbothered as ever, slid forward and pressed a warm, affectionate kiss to his hand. With that sweet, innocent love, she leans in and plants a kiss on her brother's cheek, completely blind to the wave of despair crashing inside him. The weight of everything he knows crushes his spirit, and hot tears pour down his face. When Karen sees it, she cups his head and chants like a kid, trying to hush the agony. Yet the moment her name hits his mind, it turns into a brutal warning of the future he's desperate to stop. He wipes his tears in pure fury, refusing to believe tragedy gets to sneak into this story. Then it hits him. The game's real main plot hasn't even started yet, so he still has time and choices. Just as his mind spirals, Karen's voice snaps him back. "Are you unhappy again?" He shoots back that he's fine, that he'll handle it. Her trust is so innocent it almost hurts, because she tells him she'll always be okay as long as he stays by her side. Overwhelmed, he yanks her into a crushing hug and makes a silent, ironclad promise. He will protect her. His resolve hardens into an unbreakable oath. An oath he hurls straight at the grim, skeletal specter of fate hanging over his sister, Karen, because he's determined to rip her fate apart and rewrite it. Zex, a young boy with his arms crossed, stared at this wild new reality, because he'd been reincarnated into a dating action RPG called Asterisk: The Tale of the Brave Saint Asterisk. In this world, he's just some background nobody, Caroline's older brother. And right beside him, Caroline, still a tiny toddler, happily scribbles with crayons on paper, completely unaware. The whole story split into 3 wild acts. The biggest chunk happened at the academy, where your gender choice locked your fate. Pick a boy and you become the hero. Pick a girl and you're the saint. Then came the adventure to reseal the demon lord, and after that, the tale dove into romance, with each player chasing their own love story using the classmates they met back at the academy. Then he turned specifically to Caroline because she only showed up if you picked the female protagonist, the saint. And boy, in that run, Caroline was the worst rival imaginable. Selfish, arrogant, and drenched in jealousy from the very first meeting. Basically the polar opposite of the pure, innocent saint. She remembers how her jealousy kept spiraling every time more people flocked to the saint, including the main love interests, and that envy pushed Caroline into harassing her, which, hilariously enough, only made the saint look even more impressive to everyone around her. The star path met a grim fate, and Caroline couldn't stomach it anymore. So she finally teamed up with the demons to hunt down the saint, and that last, unforgivable move sealed her end for good. The quiet memory gets ripped apart by a bright, cheerful voice. His little sister, Karen, chirps her name, tugs at his knee and eye, and proudly shoves a paper blanketed in wild scribbles. She stares at her masterpiece, gushes that it's amazing and really good, and grins so hard it hurts. Karen shuts her eyes like she's praying for a pat on the head. He gladly leans in, softly rubs her hair and shoots back a thankful smile. Her joy practically spreads through the room. She sits up straight amid her papers and crayons, buzzing that she'll draw more for her knee and her eye, and when he sees that sweet, innocent happiness, something hard clicks in his mind. He has to act now, before her fate catches up and ends her life. He stands alone, staring out the window as a daring plan snaps into place. If he dodges the game's story, he can rewrite the ending. He decides the real key is Karen. Raise her right and she won't grow up arrogant, won't become the saint's enemy, and won't cave to the demon's temptations. His expression turns stone cold, and steely resolve locks into his eyes. Down the hallway, 2 maids stare from the end, whispering in shock because that kid looks way too serious for his age. At the grand staircase, his mind gets stuck on this idea of parental love. While out of sight, 2 maids gossip nearby, spilling the truth behind Caroline's future villainy. She gets zero affection from her parents, and the whole household staff treats her with icy indifference. This knowledge hits like a ton of bricks. He realizes the only way forward is to make their parents fall for Karen, and he's convinced it's impossible. He remembers seeing them just once the first time they dumped her here, and even then, she still recalls them. So he steels himself, storms up to the butler, and orders him to tell him the moment the master and mistress come back. The butler just nods calmly and agrees. 3 long months drag by, and his rage finally boils over as he glares at the estate, seeing that his parents would ditch their own kids in 2 separate mansions. As he seethes, Karen yanks his sleeve, desperate to use the restroom right now. He hoists her into his arms without even hesitating, bolts through the halls, and she clings to him tight, face twisted in pain as she whimpers. It'll be soon. He hammers his hand on the door and gets there just before it closes. Then he freezes, waiting, as a voice from the foyer booms up the stairs. The master and mistress are here. His eyes blow wide with pure shock. He bursts onto the railing above the entrance hall, and right below him his father and mother stand, surrounded by the staff. While he calls their names, his voice trembling with desperate hope. Parents don't even look up. Then the butler snaps, sharp as a blade, calling Cyril by name, Zex, and barking for him to get down from there. He freezes in disbelief as they totally brush him off. His father just orders the butler to pour tea. Then everyone turns and walks away. Karen slips up beside him and asks what's wrong, and he blurts out that his parents didn't even see them. But the lie tastes thin and empty. Later, he sits down with Karen and pulls out a whole set of stuffed rabbits, using them to teach a lesson she's never really understood, pointing to the rabbit dad, the rabbit mom, and their little bunny, then showing, right there with the cuddly figures, how the mom rabbit wraps her child in love, holds the plush family tight, then explains in a gentle, steady voice that a mom and a dad are the kind of people who love you, hug you close, and never let you face danger alone. He drops onto the floor beside Karen and keeps teaching her about family, grilling her with, "Do you get it?" And Karen beams, saying, "Yes, I totally do." She beams, clutching two stuffed animals and proudly shouting that they're Neon Eye Mother and Neon Eye Father. Then he grins at her progress and says he just needs to run to the restroom for a minute. As he strides down the hall, he suddenly stops, because behind that huge door, he catches voices arguing about the territory, and the moment he hears it, his resolve hardens. He has to figure out a way to make their parents finally see Karen the right way. Behind that door, his father shuts down the whole idea of dealing with the kids like it's a headache he refuses to touch, while his mother presses, "Why were we even out there?" And the moment the conversation dries up, he snaps to the butler, Sue's, "Handle it." Confident Hill steps in and nails it. She lays it out without mercy. Kids are unbearable, always yelling and making a mess, and she will not have them slobber all over her clothes. She even admits Cyril, aka Zex, wanted to meet them, but she shuts it down fast. She's just telling him to ignore us. He froze in the hallway as his mother's final dismissive words clawed through the room. "Just feed me some story and handle it yourself." Her rejection hit him like ice. He trudges back to Karen's room with a heavy heart, and she's still cheerfully playing, yelling "Nai" and "I" like it's a game. Then her eyes snap to him and she begs for a book. He gently but firmly corrects her, reminding her he's only her brother, not Nai and I mother father. He nods and they sink into the seat side by side, cracking open the book together. And as the pages turn, he can't help replaying his place in all this, even though he's only her older brother. But he steels himself to love her like any real parent would, and you can see it in every single day. They fall asleep side by side. He wakes up early to help her get dressed, and they eat their meals together, shoulder to shoulder. Her bond keeps getting tighter by the day. Then, out in the garden, Karen's eyes blaze when she spots a glowing butterfly. "So pretty," she blurts out, calling it out and asking what it is. He tells her it's a magic light butterfly, drawn here because the gardener takes care of the flowers so well. She stares with wide-eyed wonder as her brother Cyril jabs a finger toward the estate's gardener, who's busy tending the flowers. And when the gardener spots them, he abruptly looks up at their young master, shocked. With a warm, real smile, Karen thanks the gardener, and you can literally see it hit him. He's moved. Cyril just watches, and pure relief washes over him. He can't shake the thought that with all that love in her heart, Karen is no longer doomed. For now, she's simply a good child, kind, bright, and safe. Just as he thinks he's finally safe, a grim picture from the game snaps into his head. Karen, lifeless and soaked in blood, and his peace instantly shatters. He won't let his guard down for even a second, because she's only 2 years old and his instincts scream that her personality could still twist. And the way this world mirrors the game so eerily tells him it might drag her onto the same tragic end. Just as dark thoughts start crawling in, Karen's bright call cuts through, "Nia and I." And there she is, standing among the flowers, butterflies circling like her loyal friends. The sight of her sweet, innocent joy hits him hard, snapping his resolve into place. A silent vow forms in his chest. He'll do anything, to protect his adorable little sister. He cups a butterfly on his finger and she lights up, asking if he's into them too. While she's awestruck, Cyril finally gets it. The future won't budge unless he grows stronger. Later, alone in his room, Cyril snaps upright in bed, face locked in determination, as a plan starts to take shape. At dawn, he kicks off a secret training routine, sprinting and hammering out calisthenics, while counting every stretch like it matters, brushing off warnings that it's not good for kids to build muscle, and deciding right then to train smart for his young body and, most importantly, learn how to fight. After crushing his physical training, he chases strength to a fresh corner of the estate and creeps toward the commotion, peeking into the bustling kitchen where the staff are working at full speed. He stares as the chef, red-haired and sharp-eyed, shouts and blasts the oven to life with a roaring fireball, and the whole site basically screams, "Yep, your suspicions were right. Magic is real." He can't believe it. This world runs like a game, and the magical stats even show up in real body traits. Now he's decided he'll train in magic. Then the chef swivels and locks onto him, demanding what the young master is doing inside his kitchen. Stunned, he mumbles that he just needs some water, and the chef shoots the message to another kitchen worker, who nods back and answers, while Cyril stands frozen there, small and unsure, in the roar of the busy room. He cranes his neck from across the room as the kitchen staff work, and the chef sighs that it's a tragedy for a noble to be colorless, while a maid casually whips up a glowing ball of water like it's nothing. Cyril finally gets it. In this world, everyone is born with mana and a specific attribute, and that's what lets them materialize magic on command. His own pale white hair means he has no attribute, so he's one of the rare people who can't cast that way. But the maid, her blue hair and sharp blue eyes scream water, because she's a full-on water magic user. As she shoves the book into the chef's hands, the maid keeps chatting. Spells, she insists, are born colorless, and the two of them agree it's a disaster for the house to feel so empty of light, because Karen, the blonde young lady, is absolutely going to inherit the family's light magic. The maid smirks to herself, convinced that once Karen masters light magic like the saint, the master and mistress will be over the moon. Yet she can't shake the bafflement of why the parents act so icy toward her, when Karen is supposed to be the family's future. Hiding around the corner, he catches even more gossip from the servants, mocking him as the colorless brother. They say Karen's been getting treated better lately, but as for him, nothing changes. Then they grin, dreaming of bragging about the day they serve Karen once she masters light magic. As he backs away, Cyril finally understands it all. This is what the world thinks of the colorless, failures the instant they're born. Later, he spots Karen asleep in her bed, tossing and turning, and he can't shake the thought. Just because she lacks an attribute doesn't mean she's worthless. She jolts awake, and tears instantly pool in her eyes. Then he softly urges her to take a nap, and she can only meekly nod like she can't even argue. Once he tucked her in, he quietly shut the door behind him, letting her finally rest in peace. His training kicks back off in the woods, and he's gasping for air as he hammers down on his next mission, perfecting the physical boost, a technique that turbocharges his body by pumping mana straight through it. He's sure this is the right road, because a physical boost is something anyone can tap, even without an attribute, a lesson he remembers from a game. But until the magic behind the attribute list is uncovered, conventional spells are still out of reach, so he braces hard and tries to force his mana to listen. The attempt detonates in his face. He screams as a thick, dark ooze blasts out of his hand, splattering his arm. With a grimace, he realizes the hard truth. Even the tiniest slip in the output triggers this disaster. They say anyone can use the technique, but the danger is absolutely brutal. He stares at his own hand, slick with a thick, dark ooze, and realizes he screwed up when he reinforced the defense around his head. Because it didn't hold, it bit back, unleashing a grotesque backlash. This is a technique no sane person would ever dare to use. Even with the injury screaming through his body, he tightens his fist until it aches, because this is his only move, the only way he can protect Karen. With her resolve forged, Karen stirs awake in her massive, ornate bedroom, sitting bolt upright, scanning the empty room and calling out for her brother like, Where are you? Her search finally drags her to the doorway. There he is. With a sob of pure relief, she lunges forward and clamps her arms around him in a tight hug, while he freezes, startled, and blurts out apologies for her being woken up. Her relief snaps into worry the moment she spots his injured hand. "Me and I, your hand," she blurts, fear swelling in her voice. He tries to play it cool, insisting it's nothing and that he was only practicing magic. It hits her too hard. Tears spill down her face as a frightened cry bursts out of her. He snaps into action, apologizes for startling her, then wraps his bleeding hand in cloth to block the awful injury from her eyes. Seeing how terrified she is, he finally gets it. He has to be way more careful. So when he starts practicing magic again, he decides to make sure Karen never finds him. And to calm her down, he asks if she'd like him to read her a book. It actually works. Before long, they're huddled together as he flips through a huge storybook, spilling the tale of the elder of the forest who demanded 3 things before granting a wish. As he reads, his mind slips away. He can't stop wondering how that story's protagonist is so unstoppable. He figured it was because they were a reincarnator armed with special knowledge. But then it hits him. He's a reincarnator too. So why do their strengths feel worlds apart? His silence throws Karen off and she blurts his name. Her voice yanks him out of his head. She stares up at his shadowed face, calling his name again, and then it hits. That terrifying realization starts to bloom in his mind, and in that case Karen's voice snaps him out of his head, calling his name. Then she rushes in with an apology for interrupting and asks where they left off in the story. After that day, he dove into training his magic in secret, practicing like his life depended on it. So Karen would wake up alone in that huge bed, right out of his sight. He threw himself into his studies, while she could only stare from afar. And even when they tried to read together, something sharp and tense crawled into the air between them. That separation crushed them both. He'd jolt awake in the dead of night, buzzing with restlessness, while she lay wide-eyed in her own bed, gripping a little toy like it was the only thing keeping her steady. Finally, Karen can't take it anymore. She rockets out of bed, storms down the empty halls, even peeks outside, yelling for her brother, but he's nowhere. Her hunt drags her outside, and right there she spots the estate's gardener. He bows and greets her with perfect formality, but she barely even looks his way. Her whole focus is still locked on finding her brother. The gardener shoots her a worried look, tells her she can't wander off alone, and offers to walk her back. Then when Karen demands her brother again, he shakes his head and says he hasn't seen Zex. With zero leads to chase, she trudges back to her room and drops to the rug alone, feeling loneliness crash over her like a wave. Meanwhile, beyond the mansion, Cyril drills in the woods, honing his mana until it surges through him. Then he blasts a chunk of wood to dust right in his bare hand. He checks his gains and realizes his mana control lets him double his strength now. Maybe he could even smash stone if he goes further. Just as he's about to push again, he suddenly stops dead in his tracks. Karen is right there, not far away, and he blurts her name with pure alarm. He snaps his head toward Karen, panic flashing across his face, and demands to know when she showed up and how long she'd been watching. She answers with one quiet word: hate. Her head stays bowed as she whispers the word again and again, spelling magic she despises, adding one more cursed syllable each time. She looks up, tears carving streaks down her face, and when she tries to speak again, her voice shakes. Cyril's heart snaps with sudden, sharp regret at the sight of her breaking. With a desperate cry, she blurts out the truth. She's terrified, and she begs her brother to stay right by her. The impact of his choices slams into him, hard. He berates himself, finally seeing the truth. He tried to protect her, but he only hurt her. He swore his secret training was for her, and yet it's exactly what he feared most: Karen's tears. He hits his knees, yanks her into a crushing hug, and blares out a heartfelt apology, admitting it might sound like a cheap excuse, then swears with full conviction that he loves her more than anything and that feeling will never, ever change. She wipes a tear and demands the truth. "Do you really mean it?" And he vows right there that he does. His words sweep away her fears in an instant, and a bright, Relieved smile lights up her face. Moments later, they stroll hand in hand toward the manor and Karen calls after him, begging to keep talking. He shoots her a worried look, asking if she's really sure, because magic can turn terrifying fast and he can't risk getting hurt. She doesn't budge for a second, standing her ground and saying she's certain because she'll be right there with him. She swears it's not true, cheeks puffed up as she snaps that she hates the thought of him getting hurt, and Cyril finally gets it. Those tears weren't about magic at all, they were for his safety. When he presses her about magic again, she declares, "I'll love it if it means you stay with me." And when her words hit him, he decides to teach her, and she practically lights up, calling him Nyan Sensei. He kicks off her training by laying out the basics of ball magic, and tells her it all starts with her fire attribute. Karen's face tightens with pure focus as she nods along, and the red eyes plus her blonde hair make it clear she doesn't just have one power, she's got two: light and fire. He digs into what his past life taught him about light magic, the kind of rare power that doesn't care if you're just capable. Some rumor swore the real key is having a deep, genuine compassion for someone else, and that requirement drives him nuts because it's so vague. Especially since, in the original story, Karen never once manages to use her light magic, the power of the saint, even though she had the potential. As he softly pats her head and showers her with praise, Karen lights up, giggling with pure joy. Then a thought hits him. If compassion is the magic key, Karen shouldn't struggle at all with light magic in her current state. This realization slams a new fear into him. If she masters light magic, the royal family and every heavy hitter in power will come hunting. He refuses to let her get hurt, but right then, his focus gets blown away when Karen proudly shows off two tiny fireballs she just conjured. Watching her get stronger, he can't help but wonder, can he truly protect her when her power keeps rising? Years slipped by, and even with the future still foggy, he and Karen kept growing stronger, training side by side until, one day at a time, hope finally started to burn bright inside him. Then a brand new presence slipped into their world. A maid in formal attire, calm as stone, who gave them a perfect, polite greeting they couldn't read. She steps forward and introduces herself as Cheyenne Schwillichroma, straight up saying she'll be their caretaker. And before the pleasantries even land, Cyril's mind snaps with one cold, chilling thought as Karen speaks. This woman is a spy. In a massive hall with soaring ceilings, a woman with long dark hair leaned in and told Cheyenne she'd finally landed her first real job, right from the holy royal family. Then shoved a blazing, glowing document into her hands and demanded Cheyenne prove she was worthy, because serving them wasn't just work, it was an honor. Right after her new assignment, Cheyenne steps up in front of Cyril and Karen, and as Karen rushes to hug her brother, Cheyenne finally speaks up, introducing herself and promising she'll take care of them from here on out, while Cyril answers with a respectful greeting. She darts her eyes around, clocking that the room's got a stuffy heat, then slides over and snaps the window open, calm face, professional to the core. Just then her foot slips and she faceplants into the floor with a brutal splat. She freezes there for a heartbeat, irritation flashing across her face. Once she'd finally caught her breath, she shut the door to the kids' room with a soft scrape, and now there was a little mark on her cheek. Then she told them she'd be right out in the hallway, ready if they needed anything. The door clicks shut behind them, and Cyril clamps his sister close as he snaps his focus into place. His target is Caroline Flammerl Ui, Sari Fornata. He realizes his job is to watch her like a hawk, because she might be able to use light magic, and the second he sees even a flicker of it, he has to rush back to the palace to report it. Meanwhile, Karen has no clue as she stands there calm and peaceful, wrapped in a faint, ghostly glow. Outside in the corridor, Cheyenne waits by the door like she's on alert, eyes focused and expression sharp as she keeps guard. After a bit, the door swings open and Cyril shows up, dragging Karen in with him. He tells Cheyenne straight up that his sister has to use the bathroom, and Cheyenne bows without a second thought. Then Cyril tells her she doesn't need to come, but Cheyenne digs in like it's her duty, and insists she's going with them. She tells Karen to call Cyril Oniisima, But Karen grins at her brother, blurts out "Nia," and begs him to look at her. She tilts her gaze to her brother, cheeks warming with a blush as he tells her to call him Oni Isawa, while Cyril decides it's finally time to start her formal education and teach her to be a proper lady. She lets out a delighted giggle and pulls him into a warm hug, and from across the way Cheyenne watches, stunned at how rare it is for noble siblings to stay this close. She can't help thinking this is perfect. Now she can keep tabs on both kids at once. Later, out by the trees, Cyril thrusts out his hand and whispers a disguise. Then a tiny glowing familiar bursts into life and flutters through the air to scout Cheyenne from afar. He turns inside, arms crossed, staring out the window like he's deep in thought. Then suddenly, Cheyenne's voice snaps through, and she announces the afternoon tea is ready, rose cookies included. While they're settling in for tea, another maid with animal ears shakes as she pours Karen a cup, and right as the tea hits, it sloshes all over. Karen doesn't even blink, just asks if the flowers are from the estate garden. Cheyenne, calm as ever, fixes the other maid's grammar under her breath. Cyril asks Cheyenne if he can pour his own tea, but she shuts him down, saying it's her job, then pours a cup for herself and makes it spill on purpose, just like the other maid did, and Cyril just stares, quietly deciding he'll talk to the chef later. After pretending to trip, she still slides a perfectly prepared cup of tea in front of Cyril. No spill, not a drop out of place. Soon, she pushes a cart packed with spotless tableware into the kitchen, dead set on proving to the staff that she belongs as Lady Caroline's new maid. Then the gardener spots her working, questions whether she actually washed everything herself, and when she nods, he gives her his full, approving stamp. The kitchen cornered Shine, grilling her like, "What's your real motive?" She smirked and said the air was colorless. The whole family was doomed, and anyone who stayed must be a total weirdo, so why would Shine work here? Shine stayed icy calm and answered, "I got hired through a referral. My name is just Maid, that's all." She can't help but wonder why she's really here, and then it hits her. The younger sister, all golden hair and light magic, is the spark of hope the family has been chasing for their future. She's slaving away at the sink, scrubbing dishes, while two other kitchen workers gossip nearby. Then the younger one cracks a comment about how sweetly, innocently Karen clings to her brother, even though he's got no color at all, and how kind she is to the servants. The older one nods right along, grinning because she can't wait to watch that young lady grow up. While she keeps scrubbing, Cheyenne shoots Karen a message, asking whether the rose jam is made from the garden's roses. Then the kitchen maids light up at the young lady's curiosity, one joking that they should butter her up with sugar-coated roses next so she'll be their next saintess, and the other snaps back that they shouldn't push their luck, because the young master would definitely frown. But through all their chatter, Cheyenne stays stone cold and unreadable. She clears the last of the dishes, then just stands by the sink with broken plates scattered at her feet. When the kitchen maid comes over, ready to stash the rest, she only nods and lets Cheyenne's done be the end of it. Later, a soft knock rattles the door, and a voice from the hallway calls out that dinner's ready. At the dinner table, Karen blurts out for her brother, buzzing with excitement, but when Cheyenne reaches in to help the young lady with her napkin, Cyril steps in and snaps at the maid to back off. He'll handle it. Karen shuts him down immediately, insisting she's got it, and then Cheyenne pivots, offering to help her eat her meal. She flashes her proud declaration and insists she can eat all on her own. Cyril breaks into a warm smile, praising her like she's unbelievable. Karen lights up. "Yeah." Cheyenne leans in and corrects her with a calm, "Yes." And Karen's grin freezes as Cheyenne's face stays totally unreadable. Later that night, Cheyenne slips into Karen's bedroom with a nightgown in hand, and when the girl starts scrambling toward her bed, Cheyenne cuts in. It's time to change. Right before she can step in, Cyril bursts onto the scene with Karen glued to his side, and he turns to Cheyenne like it's already decided. "Don't worry, I'll handle changing my sister's clothes." The maid starts to object, claiming it's her job, but Cyril just flashes a confident smile and shuts it down, saying he actually loves taking care of Karen. Cheyenne hesitates for a beat, then gives in. With her night duties finally done, she tells Zex and Caroline good night, slips out the door, and shuts it tight behind her. Then her smile drops as she starts down the stairs. As she strides through the servant quarters, another maid jumps in and blocks her path, blurting out a question. How long the new maid for the young master is supposed to stick around this time? She froze at the doorway, fingers gripping the handle, and listened as their voices spilled out, talking about the first maid and how brutally her exit went down, with one person snarling that she hated the colorless, called them subhuman, and quit almost immediately because she couldn't stand them. Inside two maids' rooms, the two girls sat on their beds and traded whispers. One swore the young master was straight-up creepy, because he'd started talking like a grown-up at just 1 year old, and then started snapping and yelling at the servants so suddenly that the next maid quit on the spot. The other maid jumped in and said maybe he was possessed, and both agreed it was safer to keep him far away from the little one. Shin burst into the room, making them jump, then spoke cool and collected, asking if they were finished for the day. Until one maid spun around and snapped that the master and madame don't care about the kids at all, and that every effort is pointless because the second anyone tries to reach a young lady, the young master steps in and shuts it down. She stormed right past them in silence, and one of the maids couldn't help herself. She snapped that it must be so nice to babysit the young master since he handles everything on his own, and that Cheyenne should just kick back. The other maid fired back in the same tone, complaining it wasn't fair to the housemaids stuck working like crazy. The taunting wouldn't quit. One of the mates even told Cheyenne to come help them, while the other sneered that the young master being colorless meant his future hinged on how well he could color with the young lady, calling it all a waste. Cheyenne just went silent for a beat, then turned away, waved them off with a simple good night, and left those two to fume and stew in their own irritation. Later, all alone in her room, she started peeling off her clothes, and her mind snapped back to that first meeting with the young master, realizing he wasn't trying to butter up his sister at all. His gaze stayed calm, measured her like a calculated piece, and checked whether she could be a real boon for both of them. As she yanked the ribbons from her hair, her smile vanished and seriousness slammed into her face. Those two had her full attention. Perched on the edge of her bed in that nightgown, she clenched her resolve. No way could personal feelings mess with the job ahead. Her mission was crystal clear. She just had to convince Zex to let her stay right by Lady Caroline's side. Suddenly, a brutal memory crashed in this tiny, shadowy kid sprinting through the dark, while cruel words chased them. Disgusting child, you parasite, nobody wants you. The memory snapped into pure terror. Her younger self, face contorted with fear, was screaming at something she couldn't even see. Why are you here? Don't come near me, you filth. And then, somewhere, her father's voice still rang in her head, laying out their family's history. How they'd once stumbled in a political fight, got thrown out of the country, and then the royal family stepped in when it mattered most, giving them a lifeline to finally rise and thrive. But that help cost her everything. He towered over her and demanded the whole package. Her eyes, ears, body, hair, and even her soul for the royal family, spitting out that even if she was worthless, she'd still be nothing more than a sacrificial pawn. That thought wrecked her with terror, but a desperate spark of hope refused to die. What if she finally earned her father's acceptance by giving her life for the family for him? A fading memory snapped her back to the present. There she stood in the kid's room. Cyril spotted her and waved it off, telling her not to worry about them, but Cheyenne shook her head and said it was her job. If she was getting paid for it, then it only made sense that she put in the hours. She then whipped her focus to the young lady and declared it was time to change clothes, while Karen clung to her brother, barking, "No, Nye and I will do it," in fierce defiance. Shine stayed calm, insisting that handing out responsibilities properly was part of a lady's duty, and pressing Karen with one sharp question. Did she really want her brother acting like a servant? He cradled his sister close and told her he couldn't wait for the day she'd blossom into a splendid lady, then swore she'd always be his little sister. the pride and joy that made his life shine. His words hit like a spark, and Karen's resolve flared. She clenched those small fists and swore she'd give it everything she had. Cheyenne, watching from the side, caught her success and couldn't help smiling, knowing Karen would truly put in the hard work. And she did it. Under Cheyenne's watchful stare, Karen drilled proper table manners, mastered how to curtsy, and learned how to hold herself with real grace, slowly turning into a true young lady. Day by day, her confidence swelled like a storm about to break. Then one afternoon in the garden, she grinned at her brother and dared him to a race to the gazebo, launching forward with a bright, cheerful cry. As he watched her sprint, Cyril snapped his head to Cheyenne with pure gratitude, thanked her for everything, and admitted her timing couldn't have been better. Because before she showed up, he'd have had to keep a proper distance from Karen, even as her sister, but now he could lean on Cheyenne since he knew next to nothing about girls. He and his sister, Karen, braced for a race across the lawn, and Karen demanded they launch at the exact same time so it would be fair. From the estate's gate, Cheyenne watched in silence, secretly wondering if she'd finally cracked his full trust. That thought yanked up a nasty memory, her father's brutal voice snapping through her mind, screaming she was a useless nuisance. Even with the sting of old memories, a soft, bittersweet smile curled on her lips, like being trusted warmed her all the way through. Soon after, when winter finally draped the estate in cold white silence, Karen's delighted squeal sliced through the crisp air. She jabbed a finger at a snowy patch where several white rabbits were bouncing around, chirping for her brother to come see how ridiculously cute they were. One rabbit snapped into a hostile stance, all menace and slammed posture, and Shine instantly surged forward to shield Karen, barking a warning to back up. Yet the girl didn't flinch. She dropped to one knee, reached out with gentle care, and spoke softly to the creature, promising it had nothing to fear. Karen used a soft touch, and it worked. She cradled the now calm rabbit like it was nothing, staring at how unbelievably fluffy it was while she noted the red eyes matched her own. Cyril grinned and nodded along, saying they were just as gorgeous as hers. Right nearby, Cheyenne watched the whole sweet moment, face locked in unreadable mystery. That night she sat down and penned her usual report, writing that there was still zero change in the target's magic. Then her thoughts kept circling back to that rabbit, the same one that had been snapping and hostile until Karen's light magic finally broke through. She almost brought it up, but she didn't, because it felt too unsure to stake a place in her notes. Days kept slipping by until spring finally burst in, and while Karen was out counting tulips in the garden, Cyril psyched himself up to teach his sister one more lesson, straight up asking if she remembered everything he taught her the day before. And she answered with total confidence that she did. He kicked off his magic theory, saying intuition isn't enough. You've got to grasp the rules underneath or your spells just won't land right. And while Karen leaned in like she was hanging on every word, Shine watched the whole lesson from the doorway nearby. Watching him, she couldn't stop thinking. Zexama was colorless, so he couldn't cast a single spell, yet he still went all in on teaching his sister, and that only meant one thing. He must love Lady Caroline more than anything. She watched the siblings in silence, and a thought hit her fast. There's no way the boy isn't jealous of his insanely talented sister. Her thoughts got cut off the second she spotted young Karen, jaw clenched as she strained with all her might. Small hands stretched out like she was trying to pull something impossible toward her. Then pop, a whole cluster of glowing light particles burst into existence right between her palms, blazing like a sunrise. Heron spun toward her brother, grinning like she just won the world. But behind a pillar, Cheyenne snapped the spell into focus at once. A blazing light ball, pure light magic. Her job hit her like a strike. She had to report it right now. Because the moment she did, Caroline would be hauled straight to the royal palace, and those siblings would be ripped apart and made to live separate lives. Later, over dinner, Cyril leaned in and spoke straight to the maid, demanding a private talk the moment Karen finally fell asleep. Once the young girl finally passed out cold in her bed, Cheyenne slipped out and got ready to meet the young master. He guided her out into the hush of the estate grounds, and as they strolled, Cheyenne felt this eerie, unsettling energy rolling off him, like something about this meeting was hiding in plain sight. He froze mid-step, spun to face her, and stared like the answer mattered. Then he hit her with one straight question that made the chill crawl up her spine. "Cheyenne, you're a palace spy, right?" The accusation hit her like a slap. She stammered, then clutched her face with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Cyril saw it all and treated her panic like proof. Then he slid in a deal. He'd keep her under wraps if she stayed silent about Corinne's magic, so tell him, had she reported it yet? Shane's voice cracked as she tried to refuse, swearing she couldn't betray the royal family because she'd pledged her loyalty. Cyril snapped his hand forward and broke her magical disguise, and Cheyenne gasped as her long, pointed ears lit the truth. An elf. Cyril stared her down, demanded she do what he said, and warned her straight up, refuse him and he'll out her. He also pressed the cruel reality, how the public hates elves, and let his thoughts linger on what the royal family would do when they learned one of their enemies had slipped in as a spy. He kept pressing his threat, eyes ice cold. He didn't care a damn about the nation. All he cared about was Corinne's safety. Then he flipped the whole situation on Cheyenne, pointing out that it would be her, the one who'd pledged loyalty to the royal family, who'd dragged them straight into ruin. Then he stepped up and made his offer in full form, tail between his legs, shy, and bowed low in submission. Because she agreed to his terms like they were the only way this could end. Once she agreed, he fired off his orders. She couldn't report a single word about the siblings without his say-so. He swore he'd keep her secret as long as she held up their contract. Then he gestured, and Cheyenne suddenly felt like invisible hands were wrapping around her. Cyril nodded, sealed the pact, and promised he meant every word. Her eyes went huge with disbelief as this bizarre feeling hit her, leaving her utterly stunned. She couldn't believe how fast everything spiraled out of control. She stared down her own fear. She'd been trained for this, drilled to never flinch. Yet his one simple command kept replaying in her head, and it stirred a power she couldn't even name. Alone beneath the trees, her mind spun like a storm, because that boy had tossed spells she'd never even heard of, and his stare hit her with a cold, unsettling force, leaving her with one terrifying thought. Who or what was he? In a sun-drenched garden, Cyril declares it's magic practice time, whips around to his sister Corinne, and asks if she'll try light magic for him. Corinne stares back, nervous and unsure, while they sit there, awkwardly quiet, watching him in silence. She darts in with an apology, admitting she can't wield light magic yet, then swears she'll master it someday, because it can heal and cleanse the soul. Cyril nods along, then whips around to Cheyenne and tells the maid he already filled Corinne in, ordering her to report anything suspicious and to keep light magic locked tight from strangers. Corinne's eyes go wide as her brother and Cheyenne silently reach an understanding. The shock flips into pure alarm, and Corinne marches up to Cheyenne, her voice shaking with worry as she reminds her Cyril said the light magic was their secret. She pushes the warning again. If anyone else finds out, those bad men will show up and drag her far away from him. Cheyenne just stands there, face set and unreadable. He stumbles over his words, asking softly, "Have I ever messed up, Karen, right?" Then he admits he decided it was fine to tell Cheyenne. Eyes on the dirt, Corinne finally murmurs, "Yeah, it's okay." She's shy for a beat, then speaks up, eyes locked and unshaking. She swears she'll never betray Zexama. Cyril presses her, asking if keeping that secret hurt. She just holds his gaze, and with a confident smile, Cyril answers, "I know." Now it's time to spill Cheyenne's secrets. He straight up asks what she's been told about the colorless, the ones with no attribute, and whether anyone says they're useless just because they don't have inherent magic. Corinne blurts out a shocked gasp. He leans in and tells Corinne to calm down, saying what Cheyenne believes is just the usual way society thinks about him. But it doesn't help, because Corinne's already rattled and snaps, furious, asking how Cheyenne could say something like that about her brother. She insists Cheyenne's just repeating what people think out loud, then tells Corinne, "Don't get mad." Karen bites her lip and reluctantly nods, but her face screams that the whole thing is still haunting her. He starts laying out his crazy, one-of-a-kind magic. Most mages burn mana to summon tribute spells like fire, but he smashes straight through that with tribute-less magic, using mana in its pure, uncut form. Cheyenne's jaw drops because she's never even heard of anything like it. Then Serial grins and says, "If it doesn't exist, I'll invent it." Cheyenne fires back that it's impossible, since the colorless are rumored to have 0 mana inside them. To prove it, he grabs Cheyenne's hands and snaps a spell into place, just called **joy**. Heat floods through her, she drops her gaze, and her cheeks flare as her heart starts pounding. Cyril watches her reaction and pushes. Cyril dropped the explanation and left her standing there flustered as he said he'd used mental magic to calm her back when she couldn't sit still, and that the spell he just cast was a mind manipulation trick he'd built himself. His mana couldn't be thrown out like normal magic. It had to be shot straight into the target like a satellite signal, and he warned her that if you misused it, it could get scary fast because most people can't even see it. Then he whipped around to face her, grinning, and asked her to guard his secret, saying there were other kinds of attributeless magic besides mind tricks, and they'd tackle that later. Emotions crushed over him, her cheeks burned, and she quietly promised to keep his confidence safe. Karen's moment of joy got shattered by a piercing cry, tears streaming down her face, as she blurted out that she alone was the one who deserved to hold her brother's hand. As she gripped her brother's arm, Cyril quietly pried his hand away from Cheyenne, and Karen, still sulking, couldn't stop wondering what the maid had done to earn that kind of trust. Cheyenne watched it all and just shrugged, saying she didn't care. Time flew, and before Cyril knew it, his 5th birthday was right around the corner. While days slipped by, he stayed glued to books, devouring everything about the world he'd landed in. He decided it was finally time to see how the common folks lived in this world, and he started plotting, first hitting the local church, and then the Adventurers Guild to dig up every scrap of intel. He snapped his gaze off the book and demanded of Cheyenne, "Did Karen come back?" The maid nodded. Karen's lecture still had time left. Cyril's mind raced, weighing every move as he tried to find his way out. He wanted Asterisk to go, but he also knew that if he told Karen, she'd shove her way into it and get herself caught in the middle of danger. So he whipped back to Cheyenne, and a plan sparked in his eyes. "Listen," he started. Meanwhile, Karen wrapped up her lessons and drifted through the manor's empty halls, shouting for her brother like she couldn't wait to find him. Her calls dragged her outside, and there, Cyril sat on the steps while Cheyenne kept watch. When Karen stepped closer, Cheyenne snapped her gaze over and demanded what was going on. But Seer wasn't there. He was already jammed into the middle of a loud town street, packed in with commoners, staring up at the strange architecture of the world outside his manor walls. He drifted through the commoner streets, and the main road felt pretty average, like it couldn't impress him. The alleys screamed danger, so he kept his distance from fancy shops, because if he bought anything, he knew he couldn't cook it anyway. Then he stopped at a fruit stand, stared at the colors like they were magic, and instantly realized he had 0 clue what anything was worth. He made himself a promise right then. Ask Cheyenne how the market prices have been lately. Then he spotted kids running wild in the square, with 0 parents watching from the sidelines. And that told him the place had to be safe enough to leave them alone. Then his mind snapped to the real problem: money. Sure, he'd love to grab some local food on his next visit, but asking the butler would scream something off. For a second, he even toyed with the idea that his useless father might be pulling his weight. Then he shut that down fast, trusting their family fortune to the skill of their amazing butler, Sui's. Meanwhile at the estate, Karen sprinted across the garden toward Cheyenne, shouting for her attention, and the maid turned with a calm look, asking what was going on. She halted right in front of the maid, jaw set and eyes sharp, frustration burning on her cheeks. And then she pressed Cheyenne for answers, asking straight up where her brother was. When Karen asked, a figure identical to Cyril slid into view, sitting there like he owned the place, grinning as if nothing was wrong. Then he waved and said he was right there. But Karen didn't fall for it. She snapped her finger up like a gun and yelled that he wasn't her only isoma. She gushed with pure adoration, swearing her real brother is way cooler, shining in sparkles. And every single time she lays eyes on him, her cheeks flare pink and that warm, fuzzy feeling swells up in her chest. She snapped that the decoy was nothing like him, and there was no way he'd fool her. Cheyenne chuckled and softly warned Karen that a proper lady doesn't point. Then the decoy turned to the maid and promised, "I'll explain." Cheyenne stepped up and told Karen the truth. This body wasn't real. It was a decoy she built by mixing her disguise magic with Zex's mental magic. And she demanded Karen treat that fake cereal like the real one until he comes back, so nothing spirals into chaos. The explanation hit Karen like a shockwave, leaving her totally stunned and lost, and with a blush still burning on her cheeks, she could only squeeze out one small, shaky question. Why? She marches up to Cheyenne and fires off questions, her voice shaking with pain, demanding to know why her brother never told her a thing, and why she only found out the truth from the maid. Then she turns and accuses both of them of hiding a secret ever since Cheyenne showed up, while the decoy of her brother just stands there, silent as stone. For more information on Cheyenne, please visit our website at www.cheyennecox.com. Her tiny hands dug into the fabric of her dress, and one burning question wouldn't let go. Why wouldn't he trust her with the truth? Panic claws at her mind as she spirals into a desperate plea. She's terrified she's about to lose the only person she has, and she whispers her silent prayer, shyly begging him not to be taken from her. Fear crashes over her. Her face collapses, tears spill into her eyes, and a choking dark miasma of dread seems to pour out of her. When Shine saw the young girl's suffering, she stopped hiding and told the truth. She admitted she'd been a spy at first, sent to watch Cyril. A magical contract binds her hands, so she can't spill everything, especially details that could endanger the siblings. And Cyril leaning on her. It's not love, it's a setup to keep her tracked and under control. Then she dropped the mask completely and offered a heartfelt apology. She listens, and right as the confession lands, her face softens, because she gets it. Karen admits it's only natural Cheyenne acted the way she did, with that kind of role, and that swallowing guilt is hard for anyone. But even after all that, Karen still thinks her brother needs Cheyenne, at least a bit. Meanwhile, out far from the manor, the real Cyril smirks into the chaos, because he knows his decoy never even landed in his sister's mind. He's furious that none of his fresh memories will make it to the clone, and he regrets not being there to hear her words with his own ears. Over at the estate, Karen finally gives in and collapses into sleep. Later, he storms into a talk with Cheyenne about how the decoy blew up. She tells him Karen clocked it wasn't him the moment she saw it, while everyone else stayed totally clueless. Cyril then starts spiraling, wondering if trained knights or mages could sniff out the trick too. So he clenches his jaw and decides they have to upgrade the clone fast, and he asks Cheyenne for help, and she immediately says yes. His mind snaps back to his sister's safety, so he leans in and orders Cheyenne to spell out exactly what Karen did the moment she realized he was gone, telling the maid to waste no details. Cheyenne's voice stays low as she says Karen stayed up waiting for him, then finally drifted off to sleep. Hearing that, Cyril falls silent and starts thinking fast. Then it hits him hard. His sister might be clinging to him because she has no one else. He realizes her world has shrunk to adults of lower status, and that must have twisted how she sees relationships. Then the truth lands. Her parents never once set her up to meet other noble kids. And in the end, Cyril blames himself because he's deliberately kept her circle small, only letting her meet the people he trusts. He stands in front of Karen, pointing at the mansion's entrance with a proud grin, and tells her he even built a body double for her, so she can finally ride into town with him. But Karen stares up at him, uneasy, and asks if he's really sure. He beams as he unveils his creation, a clunky, doll-stiff little figure that's nothing like Karen, and both Karen and her messed-up duplicate just stare, dead quiet, at each other. Cyril finally admits the quality is awful, like something has to be wrong, even as he swears he built a flawless copy of their minds inside the decoys. The real Karen and the replica press their palms together. Then Karen stares at their joined fingers, completely baffled. When the decoy plan crumbles, Cyril pivots fast. He lays out the technical mess to Cheyenne. The clone isn't a real body at all. It's just a blob of mana, untouchable and weightless like light. So they need a cover, and Cyril turns to Cheyenne. "Can you disguise me?" She gives a calm, professional nod and takes the spell job without hesitation. Once the spell hits, their look flips instantly. Cyril now sports brown hair and glasses, and Karen's hair is brown too, with both of them sporting glowing green eyes. Cyril tells her this disguise is a must, so they won't draw attention and the kids in town won't clock who they really are. Karen, though, she lights up at once, giggling like crazy, thrilled because now they match. Now they're finally dressed like regular commoners, and they stroll down the town streets hand in hand. Karen humming a bright little tune and singing to herself like the two of them are on an amazing secret trip. He glances down at his beaming sister, cheeks burning with pride as he thinks she's absurdly cute. And then a passerby spots them and blurts out how adorable the two of them are. Their adventure drags them through a busy market, and Karen jabs a finger toward a tiny alley. Boom! They spot a white cat, and both siblings drop to their knees to say hello, the cat meowing back like it's been waiting for them. Karen pushes through the non-stop street traffic, then slams to a stop, eyes bulging, gripping Cyril's arm as she stares in shock at other kids sprinting around, laughing and playing right nearby. She yanks his sleeve and blurts, wildly excited, "Kids," telling him to look right now. Cyril stares, hit by a sharp sting of realization that she's treating children like they're some rare, mythical creature she's never seen before. He gasped as one of the kids suddenly tripped and ate the ground face first, and right beside him, Karen stared on with a look you couldn't read. Before he could even react, Karen sprinted to the fallen boy, dropped to her knees, and demanded to know if he was okay. Her sudden entrance snapped everyone's attention, and the other kids swarmed in fast, bombarding her with questions: who she was, whether she just moved in, and if she and Cyril were siblings. Seeing how curious they were, Cyril grinned and stepped up, introducing himself and making it clear. Yeah, they were new. As he spoke, Karen spun toward him, hands twisting nervously, then asked in a barely there voice for his permission to introduce herself. Once he gave it, she gathered every ounce of courage, faced the kids again, and with a shy blush asked if she could maybe play with them. Karen's formal request landed with a jolt of confusion. Kids huddled and whispered that she talked just like an adult. Her stomach dropped and worry flickered across her face, like she'd messed up somehow, but one boy waved it off fast, saying it was totally fine, then practically shouted an invitation for everyone to play. With that, the whole group started a round of rock, paper, scissors, and Cyril leaned in from a few steps back, practically breathing out in relief. Because back home, the servants would have panicked to see Karen acting so freely. But this was exactly how she learned to stop barking orders and start figuring things out. We're hoping this experience lights a fire in her, so she finally speaks up for herself, asks for what she truly needs, and trusts people when they say something for real, because this moment becomes a massive turning point in how she grows. Just as his mind started to race, one of the kids shouted that he should join them, so he nodded, turned to follow, and slipped after the group, hidden from their sight, shyness clinging to him as he watched from the shadows of a nearby doorway. That evening, while Karen soaked in the bath, excitement bubbled up in her non-stop as she poured out every detail of her day, replaying what her new friends, Dan and Miria, said and did. Shy for a moment, then right back to tending to them with giddy energy. As their chat rolled on, she got a little shy and quietly said it was time to rinse her hair, letting the water pour over her head. Cyril grinned and asked his sister if she'd had fun, and Karen lit up, nodding that she definitely had. From the bath, she cranes her head up at her brother with shining hope and asks, "Can we go play with my new friends again?" He agrees on the spot, and she erupts in pure joy. She tackles him in a hug and blurts out that she loves him. Right nearby, Shine watches with a stiff, prim face, thinking that a lady doesn't go hugging people while she's unclothed. Later, as Karen lounges with her friends, Miria starts whining about her brother, and Karen can practically feel the jealousy pouring out of her. Another girl jumps in, saying Karen's brother is seriously awesome, and before she even knows it, Karen's beaming as she proudly declares, "He's my pride and joy." Myriad keeps rattling off her grievances. Her brother snaps at the drop of a hat, throws punches, smells awful, and even swiped a tomato she'd saved right off her plate. While in the distance, you can spot him roughhousing with another boy. As the memory slips away, the kids burst into hide-and-seek and slam out rock, paper, scissors to decide who's stuck being it. As he starts counting, the other kids scatter in a blur, yelling at him to cover his eyes and keep counting all the way to 100. He notices Karen still left behind and he snaps, "What's wrong?" pushing her to hurry up and hide, while his gut tightens because he can't shake the feeling he's already losing like he did after the first game. His stern look melts the moment he understands what's making her hesitate. Karen tugs at his shirt and calls out to him, not as Zex, but as her brother. He leans down and talks to her softly, telling her she's got to learn how to walk around town on her own, like it's a huge step for her future. Then he stares at her and asks, "Can you do it?" With a soft, "Okay," Karen bolts off to hide, and he watches her disappear with a warm, happy smile, thinking about how fast she's growing. He realizes that, since his old life ended while he was still younger, he feels more like her father than her brother, and the thought makes his chest feel bright. As the count neared its end, Karen spun in panic, hunting a hiding place and grabbing onto the nearest doorway while the other kids shouted at her. Then the second the count hit 99, a huge dark hand snapped over her mouth, stealing her gasp as the alley rang out the final number. He spun around in the empty town square and shouted into the open air, officially kicking off the hunt, "Are you ready?" A gloved hand clamps over the girl's mouth, her green eyes blazing with terror, and down on the street chaos detonates. Men snatch up the kids. One brute yanks Karen, and she fights like a wildcat as he growls for her to stay silent. Another snarls, demanding to know who these salons even are, while a third guy barks that they need to let the children go. The violent present slams into a gentle flashback, Cyril kneeling before Karen, holding out a tiny bouquet. Then the piece shatters. Karen lunges to warn Dan, but Dan only turns back in confusion as a huge man steps in front of him. The scene slaps the title on it, **A Promise Between Siblings**. Elsewhere, a young boy with reddish-brown hair and glasses flings his hands up to cover his face, counting the seconds like it's game time. Then a voice booms, asking if he's ready. He's standing alone in the town square, yelling into the silence like it owes him an answer. And when nobody replies, he grins and jokes to himself, "Man, it's like everyone's dead." He stretches, then instantly realizes, yeah, no one's answering a joke that dark. For a second, he even thinks about using his detection magic to find everyone in the blink of an eye. Then he shuts the idea down and clings to the non-attribute spell he made himself. Because when detection hits, it blasts out waves of his mana to scan the air around him, pinpointing anyone nearby, since everybody has at least a little. He shuts that idea down, convinced it'd be childish to depend on something like that, and then he snaps back to purpose. He's going to find them the right way with his own eyes and his own legs. "Let's start," he tells himself, and then he declares his search pays off fast. He spots a cluster of kids hiding and shouts that he's got them, and they fire back that he was way too quick. Then the boy they call Zex bursts into a triumphant laugh, bragging that this is exactly what happens when that so-called odd child finally decides to take things seriously. Even after that playful win, a cold unease starts creeping in his gut. He mentally counts the kids still missing, Karen, Dan, and Tara, while the ones he's already found, like Miria and Dan, crowd around the place with him. Vague unease snaps into a razor-sharp premonition, like your gut is screaming that something is horribly wrong. He instantly senses the mana surge. That's the emergency signal he and Karen swore on. the distress call they'd only ever use if something terrible hit. A woman calling him Zex gets on his nerves, so he snaps to attention, focuses hard, and fires off his detection spell. And right away, he locks onto Karen's signature in a nearby alley. Thinking the rooftops would get him there quicker, he fuels his body with magic and rockets across the tiles. Then his detection lights up. Karen, Dan, and Myria are huddled together, while Tara hangs back a bit farther. On top of that, he spots 3 strange mana signatures he's never seen before tagging along with him. He darts into the alley and his breath dies in his throat. Karen is trapped in the grip of 3 hulking, menacing brutes, and the shock hits him hard. He knows he can't just rush in blind. He needs a plan first. Crouched on the roof, he grits his teeth and makes himself breathe, because a straight-up attack is a gamble. If he strikes first, they could snatch a hostage before he even gets a chance to take them all down. Down in the alley, a bound and gagged Karen trembles in terror, staring on as her hands get yanked tight behind her back. She can't stop panicking, desperate for anything she could do. Right when the men are about to leave, Tara bursts in out of nowhere, swinging a stick like a weapon of war. She screams that they have to give her brother back. Cyril freezes in pure shock as one kidnapper whips around, realizing she isn't a threat, just another target. Her reckless bravery throws open the perfect opening. Every kidnapper is locked on Tara now, and Cyril spots the moment before sprinting off the rooftop. He realizes gravity's letting him move way too slow, so while he's still flying through the air, he smashes mana under his feet to form a solid foothold, then rockets forward like a cannon blast. He rocks the first guy with a brutal face shot, whips around instantly, and smashes the second man just as hard. 2 down, 1 to go. Glass's boy slips a clumsy swing from the kidnapper, fury spiking as he realizes, despite his power being boosted 5 times by physical enhancement, he still hits like a 4-year-old, and then the kidnapper grabs him tight. Panic surges, because this is an adult and he never learned a single martial art, so he forces himself to move fast before the other 2 kidnappers come back. Suddenly, the man clutching him gets swallowed by a roaring burst of flame, and down below Karen plants herself with her hands thrust forward, eyes bulging in pure shock at the massive magic she just detonated. The burning man howls in brutal agony, thrashing like he's trapped in fire, while the boy fights for freedom, screaming for him to let go. Then the second kidnapper closes in from behind, uninjured and glaring with pure rage. The second kidnapper butts in and yanks him away, coldly saying he'll put the flames out as a final mercy, like it even matters when he can't promise the man's hair follicles survive. The first kidnapper drops, knocked out and still smoldering, while the boy screams for his brother. The boy crumpled to the ground, blood pouring from a brutal gash on his head, and Tara and Myria sprinted to him, screaming his name and begging him, "Please, just answer." Hera drops to her knees beside him, panicking hard. She has no idea what to do as the blood keeps pouring, and a crushing terror locks in tight. Her brother is about to die. Just as the remaining kidnapper shifts his focus to Karen, the injured boy digs deep with his last ounce of strength, then screams "Conceal," and hurls a spell to hide himself, because he knows the end is close. Karen's eyes widen in terror as she sees the man's hand reach toward the boy, and she can only choke out a desperate whisper, begging for help. The spell hits, and the kidnapper freezes mid-step, thrown off by the noise, staring down into the empty alley like he's just missed something. Sure, he heard a voice. He spots nothing, because the concealment has already done its job, hiding Tara and the unconscious boy on a nearby rooftop. Then the man whips back toward the crying Karen, grabs her hand, and pulls her back into his plan. Karen shrugs off the man's grip and rushes to the injured boy, hands glowing with a soft, sparkling light as she lays them over his wound and weaves a healing spell. His face eases from pain to calm, and he slips peacefully into unconsciousness. The light dies down, and right on cue Karen says it's fine now, so the boy jerks upright, hand to his head, staring like he can't believe it. He mutters that it doesn't hurt, even though he swore they'd smashed him to pieces. Relief crashes over him, and Tara lunges into his arms, sobbing that she was terrified he'd die. He tells her not to call him dead so fast. Then his eyes snap to Karen, and everything clicks. Dan and the other kids crowded around the newcomers, and one girl blurted to Karen, asking why her hair looked like a different shade, until Dan snapped back and told her golden hair is the saintess, Mark. While Cyril watched the children chant brother, he clocked the sadness on Karen's face and shouted her name. Their reunion was finally over. Now they stepped out under an endless sky and sprinted away from the town, starting the next leg of their journey. They trekked down a quiet path, cutting loose from the ordeal and the tiny settlement they just left behind. Suddenly, Karen's steps stumbled to a stop, and Cyril snapped around, his voice sharp with worry as he shouted, "Karen." She stared at the ground, her voice shaking as she apologized for shattering her promise and admitting she'd been a bad girl. Then he softly scooped her up into his arms. He scooped her up, and as she pressed her face into his shoulder, she begged him, "Please don't hate me." He shut her worries down on the spot, swearing that he was the one who had to apologize for taking too long to reach her. Then her eyes filled with tears as she asked if she'd actually helped. That's when he spotted the raw red burn on her hand. She shrugged it off, saying it was just a tiny burn from blasting the ropes with fire magic. He told her she was a massive help, and that he finally understood. Saving Dan meant more to her than her promise ever could. With tears in her eyes, she admitted it. Then he leaned in and explained, softly but firmly, that if he'd shut her down and stopped her, Dan wouldn't have stood a chance to stay safe. He kept going, telling her she had nothing to apologize for and that she should feel proud. Then he called her the sister he'd always be proud of. Sure, she'd stand by him the same way, because they were siblings, and they had to support each other no matter what. Her mood shot up, she lit up like the sun and nodded, swearing she'd be there for him every time trouble came knocking. Then he grinned, thinking, wow, she's really growing up fast. And when the first evening star flickered into the twilight, he closed his eyes and made a quiet wish that she'd keep blossoming into an adult with no more disasters. A full week passed since Karen and the other kids got hit, and somehow the aftermath got handled way smoother than anyone expected. Cyril kicked things off by demanding silence from Dan and the other kids, and since he'd saved their lives, they obeyed without a second thought. Then he leaned in and threatened them, making them promise to never mention Karen's light magic. Of course, Dan couldn't resist, blabbing that he'd tell everyone, and Miria snapped back, "You idiot." Then he flashes back to how they got into this mess, starting when a drunk-looking man on the street crumpled to the ground, and Cheyenne demanded answers while Karen explained she was a Fornata daughter, so it was her noblesse obligation to understand how her people really live. Cyril, though, spiraled into guilt, convinced it was his fault for never standing up to her, shocked he'd never even realized a place this dangerous existed in the city. Cyril might still refuse, but once she pleads with that fierce sincerity about bettering their people's lives, he can't just brush it off. Then they trek through the crumbling streets, and Cyril finally spots it up ahead. There they are. He closed in on a figure cowering beneath a filthy, hooded cloak, face swallowed by shadows, and demanded to know what those kids were staring at. Then snapped that they needed to get out, because this place wasn't made for them. He's startled by that hostile tone, but Cyril keeps his cool and tells her to breathe, because under all that sharp talk, she's just scared for their safety, and he's certain of it. His internal monologue keeps roaring. This fierce protectiveness is exactly why this guy is the perfect negotiator. He pegs him as Paubel, the rep from the foreign auto slums sitting right on the edge of their territory. He steps forward and calls the man Pablo Dono, and when he sees how uneasy this kid might make him, Cyril snaps into a formal introduction. "I'm Zex Levitt Yusin Fornata, son of Lord Fornata. We're here to negotiate with you." Abel doesn't buy the whole negotiation idea, and Cyril snaps in that kidnappers have been roaming the city lately. Yeah, they've been caught, but he refuses to ignore the chance it could all start again, so he points out the two girls with him, his little sister, Karen, and their maid, Cheyenne. Paubel scoffs and snaps, "What does that even have to do with me? Nobles would never lift a finger for you. Cyril shoots back that shady folks slip into the slums to hide, and he orders Pobble, since he's the rep, to sniff out any of them and help keep the streets safe. Pobble hears "purge the slums" loud and clear, and he shuts it down fast, refusing flat out to do anything that could endanger his friends. The dark beast barrels toward the kids and the silence screams. Karen yelps in terror, but the hooded man just waves it off like it's nothing. Cyril freezes, then blurts his sister's name in panic. She spilled her whole story, how she'd rolled into town, grabbed her first friends, and then watched them get snatched almost on the spot, telling him Cyril saved them, but insisting they couldn't let anyone else in town, friends included, feel that same nightmare again. With Cyril and Cheyenne looming behind her, she grabbed his attention and begged him to help her brother. She squeezed her hands together so hard her knuckles ached, swearing she'd do anything to make it happen. Tears spilled over her eyes as she dropped to her knees in front of the hooded man, pleading with him again and again to save them. That sight stopped him cold. His mind couldn't catch up to what he was seeing. A young, noble lady, down on her knees, begging in the dirt of the slums. With the old man frozen in disbelief, Cyril stepped up fast, swearing he'd never let a soul in the slums get hurt. They just needed answers, while his people would take care of everything else, and even strengthen the city's guard. So Karen shot him a look and asked, "Are you sure that's really okay?" Then he snapped his fingers toward Cheyenne, and she marched up with a heavy pouch of money. Cyril promised a monthly payout for Pobble's services, an amount that made the old man's eyes go wide. The deal was so good it basically begged him to say yes. Pablo jumped in and promised he'd lend a hand, then immediately grabbed his head and snapped that the kid should have started with the money. While he muttered under his breath, an overjoyed Karen bombarded him with gratitude, grabbing his worn hand in both of hers until the old man went totally speechless for a beat. Cyril just watched, smiling softly. As the group left the slums behind, Cheyenne leaned in to Cyril and straight up demanded answers. Could they really trust a man like Pavel? The thought burned in her head. Loyalty bought with money can flip in seconds, and betrayal always has a price. She watched them wrestle with the moment, and the crazy part was this. Despite the man's fixed belief that every noble was his enemy, he still snapped up Cyril's proposal. Cyril just had to hand him a solid excuse and boom, he'd agree. Meanwhile, Cyril clammed up his thoughts, then explained his magic lets him read emotions, so he was absolutely certain of how it would end. Then he snapped his eyes to Cheyenne and demanded, face to face, "Are you scared of me?" Right before Cheyenne could even speak, Karen cut in like a spark, swearing she wasn't afraid of him one bit, and that she loved him. Then Cyril leaned in and pressed a kiss to his sister's cheek, thanking her and blurting, "I love you too." That moment slipped away, and Shine's face stayed calm as she started crafting her own answer. Her confession hit like a spotlight, plain, brutal truth. She was terrified of Zex. Later, in a grim, dark cell, Cyril threw his gaze at one of the captured kidnappers, only for the man to shake inside his cage and howl, begging Cyril to back off, calling him a devil. Cyril just smirked and told him the truth. He'd already dug into him. Turns out this wasn't some petty kidnapper at all. He'd murdered people. He was the real devil, and he'd already earned the death penalty. Then Cyril leaned back, eyes sharp, wondering what experiment they should hit next. He gripped his magic thoughts and stared at the ugly truth. His mental debuffs could permanently wreck someone, so he'd never dared try them on ordinary people. But now Karen's safety wasn't set in stone, and Cyril was ready to throw away his humanity if he had to. He'd look past every wrong if it meant securing her future. And as the man in the cage screamed in pure agony, Cyril snapped his decision into place. The prisoner would help him power up his progress. That kidnapping hit him like a hammer, exposing just how powerless he really was. So he snapped into action and started taking control of his family right away. After landing a few crucial spots inside the household, he finally got a real grip on the dirty internal politics of the Fornata territory. 3 days had already slipped by since he learned just how deadly the danger was. And today was his 6th birthday. He stood in a library beside a butler named Suez, and Suez dropped a game-changing law of the Holy Kingdom, 10 years after a lord inherits his noble rank, he must have 2 sons. Cyril, staring up with his short stature, realized what that really meant. They'd have to adopt someone. Staring out the window, he realized everyone must have clocked it. His family was just him and Karen. And then it hit him hard. This world treats childbirth like a death sentence for mothers with high mana, so nobles juggle polygamy just to keep the bloodline alive. His thoughts got steamrolled the moment he spotted Karen outside, waving like an angel with that bright, innocent smile. While he just stood there, watching her in stunned silence, he tossed the wave back with a soft smile, and Sue pressed him for any updates on his mom's pregnancy. Cyril answered with a calm, rock-solid no. He leaned in and pressed. So when did my father become the count? Sue's answer hit hard, 9 years ago, meaning they had just 1 year left. Cyril snapped into worry, fearing the family would be shattered or thrown into exile. Then he drilled into the problem. Could they even adopt a kid from the outside when the Foreignata name is tied to a fire bloodline? The cruel twist. He knew that trait was in his genes, even though he had no magic of his own. Sui's laid out the law. If there was no son, or if the first son died, then the state could erase the bloodline on record and rewrite it, and that hit Cyril like a punch in the chest. So this wasn't just some rule, it meant a total outsider could step in and seize their whole family. After that bombshell, Sua slapped a folder into the scene and revealed he'd already gotten an adoption proposal from a baron. So when Cyril grabbed the papers, a weird, way too familiar feeling hit him, like this family takeover idea was stalking his life. His eyes raced across the page, and his face snapped into total shock the moment he recognized the words. Sue caught the sudden shift in the boy's mood, leaned in a little and asked, "Something's wrong, right?" Shock hit for a second, then cold determination took over his face. He locked eyes on the paper, reading the name, Orca Fargata. She'd sent Bayakadai, and with a calm, steady voice she ordered Suas to carry out the adoption. So the butler didn't argue at all, bowed once, and obediently took the command. He dug up every detail from the game he'd played, and there it was, Orca, the kid he was trying to adopt, right in the love interest lineup. On Orca's route, she was fated to crush his rival family, the Foreignatas. This coming war was born right inside the Holy Kingdom itself, a nation run by a constitutional monarchy, but leaning hard on religion, too, where 2 rival faiths fought for control. One swore the human god was supreme over all others, and the other insisted every god deserved equal worship, and that clash between beliefs had been poisoning everything for years. That rift lit the fuse on beastman discrimination, because the monotheists preached that humans were the true, superior race. Even though the royal family clung to the pluralistic side and tried to keep the worst of the persecution under control, beastmen nobles still had to tiptoe through a minefield of politics. And when the conflict finally started brewing, Orca's family, the Bayakata, made the brutal choice to survive. They offered their youngest child up for adoption. And just like that, the kid was here, Orca's Sama at the front door. In the garden, the butler blurted the news and Cyril clocked how fast everything was moving. It had barely been a month since he said yes. "Take our guest to the lounge," he ordered. "I'll be there in a sec." The butler bowed and vanished, and Cyril spun to his sister. "Come on, Karen." As they kept walking, he clenched his nerve, because he already knew that 1 year from now, civil war would explode, and the Baron's family would either be wiped out or thrown into chains, just like Orca's birth family. And up to this point, everything had stayed locked to the game's script. In the lounge, a tiny voice popped up, big fluffy ears twitching as its owner cleared their throat. "Nice to meet you," the child said, eyes bright. "And yeah, this is an honor." That voice came from a kid who's been shoved to the very bottom now. Cowering on the sofa, the kid blurted, "I'm Orca Fargata. Yeah, you heard right, Bayakudai, so I'll be in your care." And Cyril froze, staring like he'd just witnessed magic. Inside his head, adoration exploded. Because the kid was insanely, painfully cute. He fought to steady himself, because sure, Orca's looks from the game were familiar. But seeing that kid in real life hit like a truck, and his cuteness was downright unsettling. Cyril whipped around, stammered an apology and introduced himself as Zex, the eldest son of Count Fornata, then gestured to his little sister, Caroline. While all that happened, Karen just stared, stunned, thinking, were we really monsters for bullying a kid that adorable in the original story? He tries to calm the boy down, tells Orca they're going to be siblings from now on, and says there's no need for all that formality. But the young beast man still looks terrified, stammering his formal name as he grudgingly promises they'll get along, and Cyril can practically see the fear crawling in his eyes. The boy blurts out an apology, admitting his brutal long trip has wiped him out, and when Cyril realizes he has to get along with Orca, he pitches a tour of the mansion, until Suez, the butler, cuts in, owning up to his own mistake and promising to escort Orca straight to his room. As the butler drags the little boy away, Cyril shoots them a strained little wave, like he already knows this is going to be harder than he expected. Karen stands beside him, staring as they disappear, her face giving away nothing. For the next week, Orca stays locked down, shut in his room and barely showing up at all, like he's scared of the world outside. And when he finally does crawl out, the smallest mention of his name sends him into a shaking panic, with a terrified yelp that catches you off guard. Cyril rakes over everything he's done this past week, realizing his attempts to make the boy feel at ease have crashed and burned. And now, with their future hanging in the balance, he decides it's time to switch tactics and close the distance the hard way. So he unveils his wild new plan: a tea party, calling in himself, Karen, and this absolutely startled Orca, while Cheyenne sweeps in with delicious tea and snacks in a gorgeous garden, and he's convinced that the conversation is about to take off. The tea party kicks off, but the air turns icy with silence. Cheyenne stands rigid like a soldier. Karen takes slow sips with a grim, dark glare, and Orca just stares at his lap, chewing his lips like he can't breathe. Cyril's completely thrown by the vibe. He gets why Orca's staying quiet, but he can't shake the memory of how absolutely thrilled Karen was to plan a tea party with her beloved older brother. Now she glares over the rim of her teacup, and her silence practically spits out hostility. He scrambles to fix everything, begging them to chill and enjoy the party he threw to make their sibling bond grow stronger. And then, when Shine nudges him to finally speak up, Karen snaps in and shuts him down, saying coldly that he never once told him this was supposed to be a welcome party for their new sibling, that she thought it was just for the two of them. And the moment he realizes what he screwed up, the regret hits him like a punch to the gut. He tossed out a quick apology for the sudden start. Then, because everyone was already there, he urged them to use this moment to meet each other, because from here on out, they'd have each other's backs like real siblings. Heron brushed off his plea like it was nothing, face cold, voice sharp. "I'm fine," she said, "just the two of us supporting each other." That brutal refusal made Cyril jump back, and a nervous sweat broke across his face. Trying to yank everything back on track, he softly scolded Karen and urged her to think about Orca's feelings alone, especially in a strange, unfamiliar place. Then he turned to the timid boy, reassuring him that his little sister really was kind at heart. Orca only managed a shaky, hesitant nod. Even after the reassurance, Orca still looked rattled. His tiny hands shook hard as he stared straight into his teacups. His fear wasn't just loud, it was dead right. Across the table, Karen pinned him with a searing, silent stare, her eyes blazing with real, no-holds-barred hostility, and that raw malice made Orca yelp in terror, trapping Cyril in the middle with nowhere to run. The tea party crashed into a suffocating silence as Karen calmly sipped like butter wouldn't melt, while Orco slumped in his seat, crushed with dejection. Cyril could only sweat, stunned that his good intentions had detonated so badly. Deep in a thick forest, Cyril powers up with body reinforcement magic, then snaps a detection spell into place, sending out glowing magical pulses to track down his targets. Reveal unleashes a huge black serpent, and he just barely twists out of its strike, so fast it's pure instinct. He mutters that he's hunting these magical beasts for real combat practice with non-elemental magic, like grinding levels in a game, and before the dust even settles, His senses snap to the next target 100 meters out. He jabs his finger like a loaded pistol, and a brilliant flash of energy explodes from the tip. He fires off the spell he calls gunfire, and mutters to himself that this is his final shot. A projectile smashes into its far-off target, scorching the land and turning trees to smoking ruin. Then he sighs and blows on his fingertip. That spell's efficiency is brutally awful, because every single shot drains almost all the mana right out of him. Training's over, so he hooks up with Cheyenne and tells her it's time to head back, realizing his own lack of control is the real problem, even as he admits he still has a long road ahead, and Cheyenne slips in with a formal Lord Zex. His thoughts snap to the maid at his side. He remembers the magical oath he forced on her. Don't spill anything about the siblings. Then it hits him. Hard, of course it doesn't cover Orca. That loophole could let her feed information straight to her employer, and now he's stuck wondering if this fake will save them or blow everything up. He keeps grinding through his options, knowing our next move with Cheyenne might force him to rethink everything. But right now he locks in on Karen. So Cheyenne nods and agrees, betting it's smarter to call Lady Karen ahead of time. No matter how hard he tried, that gap between the two kids stayed huge. Karen and Orca stood back to back, refusing to trust each other, trapped behind silence. As they walk, this whole mess gnaws at Shine's mind. She finally squeezes out a request for a moment of his time, admits she's totally stumped, and says Karen's rejection of Orca hits way deeper than she ever guessed, like her brother complex is even worse than she expected. But then one assessment hits him like a bolt of lightning. Cheyenne says she's noticed he's unusually worked up today, and it makes him freeze mid-thought as he finally realizes he's seriously misjudged just how brutal this situation is. He can't stop thinking about how real Cheyenne's worry is. She's stressing over him so hard, over the very guy who forced her into that oath spell. He asks Cheyenne for ideas on how to finally bridge the gap between Karen and Orca, and she pushes a new plan. If more contact hasn't worked, then split it up. Start with separate one-on-one talks. Cyril nods and agrees. He spends the rest of the day hammering his training, thinking that monster hunts are just the Academy's way to build strength. Yet today's run is really about letting off steam. And as he stares out over the forest, he realizes the sun has already slipped toward the horizon. This world doesn't run on levels, but everyone knows one truth. If you tear down magical beasts, your power grows. So the Temple Knight trainee gets his status screen, packed with his stats and skills right there in front of him. A magical beast is born when an ordinary creature soaks up ambient mana until it mutates into something vicious and hateful toward humans. Some swear killing one lets you siphon off its leftover mana, but nobody's ever proved it. Cyril then rips into the fight, unleashing a blast of dark energy straight at the creature. Later, while they're walking together, Cheyenne keeps pushing her advice. She points out that he's been dodging Karen one-on-one ever since Orca showed up. The moment he realizes she's right, he actually listens, and she urges him to carve out time just for the two of them, because then he might finally hear what Karen's heart is really saying. He thanks her, because her words genuinely help. She knows the stakes, though. Letting a noble's house weaknesses spill to a spy is a move that could blow everything up. Catching onto her advice, Cyril heads straight to Karen's room, thanks her for showing up, and blurts out that it's been forever. Karen shoots back that they got split up right after his 5th birthday, and Cyril remembers it all. How he caused a full-blown tantrum, swearing he needed a room just as big as hers, and how at least she had the decency to admit she wanted the same. She slides into the seat across from him, face locked in seriousness, and blurts out why Orca isn't with him today. And the question totally knocks the wind out of him. He drops his head fast and blurts out a massive apology, shocking her. Then admits he never noticed they'd barely had time to talk alone lately, and straight up claims it's his fault, calling himself stubborn for no good reason. With his head still bowed, he keeps apologizing and admits he forced her to befriend Orca without once thinking about her feelings. Then he laments what a terrible big brother he's been. Erin immediately snaps back, and her voice blazes with emotion as she declares he's not failing at all. He's her #1 big brother. She accepts his apology, urges him to lift his head, and Cyril exhales in relief, thanking her. Then she blurts out her own truth. She was jealous. And yeah, it matches Cheyenne's situation, she says, but back then she was too young to even name what she felt. Now she finally understands. Cyril finally gets it as Corinne adds, confessing she hated watching his focus drift away. Because the more Cyril frets over Orca, the more her nerves spike. Like one day his worry will turn into the kind of bond she thought only a big brother could steal. Cyril spins away and faces the opposite direction, and suddenly her heart sinks, like she's the one about to get left behind. As her fears spill out in the open, Cyril shoots to his feet and yanks her into a tight, crushing embrace, begging her forgiveness for scaring her like that. Corinne looks up at him. Shock flickers across her face, then relief rushes in. He pulls her in tight and whispers that she's the first beat in his heart, always. He admits the noble life will stack more duties and ties with other people, but then he swears on everything that her place in his heart will never, ever change. He steps back just far enough to lock eyes with her, then swears she's his one and only precious little sister, knowing jealousy will crawl back in. So he tells her to trust his promise, and when Corinne gets choked up, she agrees, even asking him to hold her just like this the next time that feeling hits. Her mind slips back to that earlier moment, where her younger self confessed she was jealous of Cheyenne, still stuck, even then, trying to understand the feeling she couldn't name yet. The memory locks in her old panic, seeing Cyril's focus snap to someone else, and blasting her with the terror that he might stop being her big brother and slip into somebody else's life. She watched him start to walk away from the library, and that old, sharp worry crashed into her chest. "Big brother," she called, voice trembling. But the moment he took another step, panic thundered in her head. She could not stand the idea of being the one left behind. Cyril blurts out an apology for summoning Orca out of the blue, then waves a cup of tea at her like a peace offering. Orca's cat-like ears twitch as she shivers, but she takes it. The second she raises the cup to her lips, Cyril fixes his eyes on her and watches every breath. She gulps the tea in one breath, cheeks blazing as warmth and relief crash over her all at once. The effect hits instantly. Her tail starts thumping the furniture like crazy. Cyril asks if she loved it, and she blurts out an enthusiastic yes. But he can't shake the feeling that something about it still isn't quite right. Seeing her flustered reaction, he immediately offers to pour her yet another cup. Then Orca shoots back that she can't possibly let Zek-sama serve her. Cyril just grins, tells her it's totally fine because he always does it, and laughs that he's thrilled she actually likes his special blend. Orca can't believe what he hears. Apparently brewing tea has been his hobby since his past life, and he even racked up a few certifications to prove it. The shock hits her so hard she lurches onto the table, tumbling out apologies like crazy for possibly insulting his passions, and Cyril only stays calm, telling her she's got nothing to fear because he isn't upset with her at all. Still, Orc's ears flick, because in the back of her mind she can tell he's a bit scared. Leaning over the table, she blurts that it was pure shock, not something else, and makes it clear he's nothing like the high noble son she'd pictured in her head. As she breaks down the picture, she paints high nobles as arrogant monsters who mess with people for fun and stomp on anyone below them just to feel powerful. Yet all the while, Cyril just keeps that soft smile and promises he won't snap, no matter what she throws at him. His calm expression evaporates the second a brutal realization hits him. He knows her words the moment he hears them. That's exactly how he and his sister act in the game. This isn't just a thought. It's survival in a brutal world, where high nobles toss commoners aside like nothing, step on the lowborn without a second glance. And for the nobles, watching others suffer is pure pleasure they savor and smash into the dirt. Cyril dug into the memories of the original timeline, where he and his sister brutalized their adopted brother, Orca, leaving him nothing but a punching bag. The torture kept chewing at him until the heroine, the saint, finally found his trail. She tended his bruises, soothed his shattered heart, and with time helped him crush the terrifying Fornata family and walk away safe. And that's the whole outline of Orca's story. Cyril finally got why the boy was so on edge. Orca had almost certainly been picked on by kid troublemakers from rival factions even back in his hometown, the Bayakudai Baron. Cyril snapped his attention straight to Orca, his voice heavy with sincerity, admitting it was a lot to swallow, but swearing that the Fornata family of today stood shoulder to shoulder with him, and that he and Karen would never, ever turn on Orca. The words hit like a punch, and Orca recoiled, stunned. He planted a quiet hope right into his promise, and the words hit like a spark. Orca lifted herself and tapped her way out of the room, then stopped just long enough to peek back from the hallway. Cyril shot her a small, encouraging wave. Then his face hardened as he figured out exactly what had to be done. Outside, the captain of the guard walked up to him and let out a chuckle, admitting he nearly lost his temper when he saw them slinging cards in broad daylight. But he thanked Cyril for cutting them some slack, saying that ever since Cyril started watching their training, everyone's been taking it way more seriously. He replied coolly, basically saying, "I get it, you don't trust me yet," then leaned in and told them, "Stay close, keep watching." Because he made it clear, nothing can start if they refuse to understand what's really going on. His mind snapped back to that conversation inside. Karen spoke with soft, honest sincerity to Orca, saying she truly hoped they could become a real family, but he should go at his own pace. And Orca just nodded, quietly and simply, like that was exactly what he needed. As Cyril guided Orca to the door, he thought, yes, this is the start we needed. If they kept closing the distance, kept talking and showing up, he was sure Orca would eventually crack and let them into his heart. His eyes snapped back to the training guards, taking in their battered armor and chipped swords. And right then, he started tallying up what he'd have to replace. He ran into Orca in the hallway and asked if the boy was going to history class, and when Orca said yes, he calmly told him he didn't need the formal Sama with him, just Zek Sama will do. Flustered but obedient, Orca still confirmed the class and kept calling him Zek Sama. During the lesson, the tutor fired a question about a historical figure's reforms, and Karen shot back the right answer on the spot, naming flood control, soil reform, and even sewer systems. Then the tutor went back to Orca and just stared at his book, forced to admit he had no idea. With a pleased grin, Karen soaked up the tutor's praise for how hard she'd studied. Her confidence kept crushing Orca's spirit, and when he finally looked away, shame flooded his chest. That sinking feeling of not being good enough crushed his chest, and he threw himself into a deep bow to Cyril, blurted out that he'd stopped him, and begged, eyes on the floor, if Cyril would still give him the job as a personal tutor, whispering that he couldn't believe someone like him deserved an honor like that. Back in the classroom, the tutor kept piling on pressure, demanding Orca's list the 3 main achievements of the third Holy King. Orca's stammered and could only blurt out flood control before his words crumbled into silence. He instantly read Karen's face as pure judgment, snapped his attention to her, and started apologizing like his life depended on it, swearing he'd never speak out of line, especially not in front of her. Karen was thrown off, and he tried to explain that wasn't even close to what she meant. Elsewhere, Cyril sat locked at his desk, glued to a report about these events, his face set in stone as he sifted through every detail and murmured, "Got it." A tutor and a butler stood right there in front of him. With a calm, steady smile, he thanked the woman for her report and sent her away. The moment the door slammed shut, the butler snapped to attention and carried out his order. The second they were alone, his stiff, formal act vanished. He crumpled forward onto the desk and groaned about how brutal it was to raise children, and the butler just nodded along, helplessly agreeing. Heron let out a tired sigh, knowing she'd pushed too hard today. Yet her mind kept drifting back to Orca, just as maddening in his own way, because he never once said a word about himself. Chasing something to take her mind off everything, she strolled through the gardens and stopped by the groundskeeper kneeling over a flower bed. She thanked him for his hard work and asked what he was planning, and when he looked up, he instantly recognized Lady Karen. He told her that, for now, he was just stirring fertilizer into the soil, and the planting would happen once it settled. Then he leaned in and asked if she had any flower in mind she wanted most. Karen froze for a moment, thinking. After a beat, she struck gold. Any flower will do, she told him, as long as it was that pale purple, the shade of her brother's eyes. The garter let out a warm chuckle, clearly delighted because she genuinely adored Zexama. Her cheeks went red with pure affection. Of course, she insisted. Yes, he's my brother. And in that moment she made it crystal clear. She loved him more than anyone in the entire world. Once her request was out of her mouth, she pivoted to go, promising the gardener she couldn't wait to see the flowers and that they'd be properly cared for. Then, as she strolled down the path, a faint sound snagged her attention. She stopped dead, brow furrowed, sure no one should have been over there. Peering into the bushes, she tracked the noise down to a shape huddled in the leaves, and there, trying to make himself as small as possible, was Orca. In a hush of the woods, Karen spots Orca alone, hand clamped over his mouth, and she tiptoes forward, calling his name in a trembling whisper. As she gets closer, she freezes. Tears are pouring down his face, and the boy is outright crying. Her heart pounds with guilt, and she drops to her knees, panicking that her own cruel words might have broken him. She swears to herself she never meant to make him cry. She jolts still, stuck between stepping closer and knowing it might spook him, while the horror of him dodging her again crushes her chest. Then her mom's face hits her mind and her fear doubles. Orca keeps choking back silent tears, crushed by the memories of the father and brothers he got torn away from. Karen watches him and suddenly gets it. She imagines herself ripped from her own brother and dumped in some strange, unfamiliar world. After locking in her choice, Karen strides into Cyril's study, squares up at his desk, and asks, "Can I take some work into town?" He agrees on one condition. Both of them have to rely on concealment magic, and Karen swallows the risk without hesitation. As she slips out, Cyril can only hope, quietly and hard, that her plan actually lands. Later, in the town's non-human district, a glasses-wearing kid watches Karen and Orca walk side by side, and you can see the worry hit him as he realizes they've never actually clicked before. Suddenly, a pack of kids barrels in. Tara, all smiles, runs up to Karen, and Dan blurts from across the crowd, pointing at Orca, "So he's your friend." He just stands there silent, while one of the kids jabs at him and calls him weird. Then another kid instantly jumps in, and Orca's stunned, speechless. That accusation detonates a wave of brutal memories. He knew it was coming. This place is exactly the same as before. Those nobles, shadowy, sneering faces, their cold disgust for a beastkin daring to live among them, and the gut-churning humiliation of being shoved to the ground like an animal. Just as his dark thoughts start to spiral, a girl with animal ears barges in, sizes him up, and asks straight out if he's a girl who hates skirts. The bespectacled boy snaps right back that it's totally fine for girls to wear pants, but another boy cuts in and tells him to shut up. Then, just as everyone's spiraling into confusion, Orca calmly pipes up that he's a boy, and the whole group erupts into awkward, embarrassed apologies. When Karen tosses out a game of hide-and-seek to cut the tension, Orca's stomach drops. He berates himself for jumping to conclusions, just as Karen adds that her brother is staying home and she'll be the one counting. Seeing the sadness on his face, she slips her hand into his, pulls him close, and drags him away while telling him to follow right as she starts counting. Instead of hiding, she hustles him through the bustling town streets, and Orca stares in stunned silence as he witnesses other beasts weaving through daily life, hauling goods, chatting with humans, something so wildly new it feels unreal compared to everything he's ever known. He halts mid-step, stares off like he's lost in thought, then whips back to Karen and asks, soft but deadly serious, why she dragged him to this town. Sitting on a nearby crate, Karen flashes him a warm smile and tells him, straight up, she just wants him to finally get to know Fornata. Then she demanded he drop the super formal Sama and use just her name. Karen explains that sure, her brother is a genius, but she swears she can spot things he misses, and her whole mission is to show Orca the side of the world her brilliant brother might overlook. The tension from their earlier meeting finally started to melt when one of the girls shot an apology to her and Orca for getting in the way. Then she flipped the script instantly, refusing to fold, swearing she'd never stop trying to be her brother's one. With the other girl finally gone, she turned to Orca, wearing a heavy, somber face, and right there she offered him an apology. She admitted her coldness wasn't cruelty at all. She was terrified he'd take her brother away from her. Her vulnerability hung there for a beat, then she lit up, heat creeping into her cheeks. After both of them apologized, she said, "Let's call it even," and asked them to call her Caro. Orca, shy but determined, carefully tried Karenchin. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and she practically beamed, praising his effort like it mattered more than anything. Karen flashes a soft smile and gently tells Orca, "Don't blow your temper at your little brother." Then she taps her chest like she's making a promise. "From this day on, you've got your big sister." Orca just stares, baffled, and mutters that he's older than her, but Karen only nods like it's settled and locks in her new role. From his balcony, Cyril watched everything unfold and couldn't help but think, "Am I smothering them?" He looked at Karen, finally grinning like she'd gotten the little sister she'd always dreamed of. Sure, it was a little brother instead, but Cyril's worries melted away the moment he saw how happy she was. A whole year has slipped by since Orca joined the Fornata family, and now he's older, sprinting through the manor like he can barely contain himself, counting down to sword training with Cyril tomorrow. Before Cyril can even start, Orca practically bounces up and asks if he can practice magic with Karen, calling Cyril Big Brother Zex. Cyril agrees, but warns him to master the basics first. Then Orca darts to two maids and demands news of Karen, only for them to tell him she just went downstairs a moment ago. Downstairs, Karen gasps and presses her hand to her mouth, cheeks blazing, as another young girl slides a tiny, round cookie her way. Right as Orca bursts in, drawn by that sweet cookie smell, the girl pops a cookie straight into Karen's mouth. Orca yells that they're snacking again, and Karen grins and welcomes him like he's officially part of the snack club. Meanwhile, Cyril stood alone in the garden, shoulders slumped, letting out a heavy sigh as he frantically wondered where the two of them had vanished. His question gets answered the second Karen, Orca, and their friend burst into the scene, breathless and apologizing for the delay. And when Cyril spots the cookie crumbs on both Karen and Orca's mouths, a quiet little smile tugs at his lips, because in his head he's thinking, Orca has settled in perfectly. In his father's study, Cyril leaned in and laid out his progress, tapping the table like it mattered. He told them how, since he took over the foreign audit territory, he's ripped out old rules, pushed reforms hard, and lifted talented people no matter who they were. Now the whole domain runs smooth as silk, even without him, which means it's time to cut loose and move on to the next phase of his plan. Then Cyril faces Cheyenne and Paubel, now rocking dyed black hair and a white mask that hides the top half of his face, and tells them he has to go undercover, since kids can't sign up as adventurers. He explains he knows dark elves dye their hair to mask their true traits, so he fully commits to the disguise. Paubel clocks his excitement, and Cyril laughs it off, admitting that being from the modern world makes this chance to finally become an adventurer absolutely electrifying. He strides up to the Adventurers Guild counter, forcing himself to stay focused, and tells the receptionist he wants to register, right now. She smiles, slides a form toward him, and explains that guild cards can't be issued without it. He lays out why he needs the disguise. This fresh persona can slip into places where Zex of the Fornata family can't show up, and once he registers with the guild, he gets an official ID that lets him hunt monsters, buy weapons and armor, and even train to his heart's content without blowing his cover by having a noble directly arm his knights. Because his father is still the official lord of the Fornato lands, he'd rather dodge any unwanted eyes. So he clenches his registration form and strides up to the counter. The guild receptionist snaps to attention, confirms his name, Mr. Sace, and hands him a guild card, telling him to pour his mana into it to personalize it and that she can walk him through the guild rules. But with Cheyenne right beside him, he cuts the whole offer short like it's pointless. Then, from a nearby table, an adventurer yells his name. They roast him for his dyed black hair, calling him a self-absorbed wannabe, then dare Cheyenne to dump him and tag along with them, until one of them steps up close, bared incisors, and growls that he'd better not be looking for a fight. Sis fires off a silent, crushing wave of intimidation. His will hits the three men like a sledgehammer, pinning them in place as terror locks them up. The lead adventurer blurts out in sheer panic. His bladder betrayed him, and so did his fear. Then he and Shine stride away from the scene while she asks in a calm voice if he went a little too far, and he admits he spiced the intimidation spell with a dab of mental magic for paralysis, only to realize he probably cranked it way past the limit. He tells her nobody there can feel mana, so his presence will stay hidden. Then he checks in with Cheyenne. After all, his training is why she could sense it, and he gives her a quick, approving nod. Shane blurts out her doubts, wondering if she should really be teaching someone like her that kind of skill. Did it feel truly right? He shuts that worry down fast, saying it's totally fine, because she's already taught him more than enough in return. Then he leans in and promises he'll be counting on her again to help train him for this brand new adventure. Right as they step out of the guild hall, he hands her his full trust, calling her Instructor Shone, and she doesn't hesitate, just nods, "Yes, sir." Several weeks fly by as Cheyenne keeps Sace under her thumb, forcing him to handle all kinds of errands. One day, she barks a new job, track down plants, and then drills into him this rule: if the request doesn't name a particular part, bring the whole root, no questions asked. He lost his balance mid-training and tumbled backward, and Cheyenne snapped into action. She cast a spell to stop his fall, shouting his name with pure worry, reminding him to always keep an eye on where he's stepping. After the session, he straight up declares he's got this and doesn't need her anymore, at least not for now. He reminds her he's climbed up to E-class, so he's done being a rookie and can't keep leaning on her forever. Cheyenne hears him out, but worry still clings to her face. Several weeks later, Shine's worry still hasn't let go, and she presses him again. "Are you sure you'll be okay alone?" From a balcony above, Karen and Orca watch every word, while Cyril cuts off his maid mid-thought, telling her she's fretting too much as she debates following him. On the balcony, Orca snatches Karen's attention and points right at Cyril, grinning as he says his brother is at it again. Then Karen snaps back, asking if Cyril's really been sneaking off lately without telling either of them. Cyril slips away from the manor with a determined look, totally oblivious to his siblings' watchful eyes, already itching for his next adventure. While up above, Orca spots the truth and shouts to confirm Karen's suspicion. On a dirt path hugged by swaying grass, three figures suddenly stop. Two pairs of shiny little shoes and bare stockings face off straight against one set of sturdy, battle-worn boots. From behind a tree, the boots' owner, a boy with reddish-brown hair and glasses, peeks out, then bam, launches into view in a single bound. Orca and Karen run into him. Orca spots him at once and blurts, "Big brother." But Karen snaps at Orca, saying trailing people is bad manners, then pivots to Cyril and tells him she and Orca were just heading into town together. Her face brightens with a hopeful smile as she asks, "Are you heading to town too?" Even though Cyril clearly doesn't want this, both kids yank him along anyway. He clenches his teeth, lets out a silent sigh, and tells himself that once they hit town, he's slipping away no matter what. As they press on, Karen drops a juicy rumor she heard someone has been doing adventure work lately, and fires it at Orca. "Do you know anything?" Orca pauses, guessing it could be the night captain. Then, right on the edge of their view, a man in a butler's uniform watches them from afar. Cyril lets out a resigned breath, lifts his hands a little, and just admits, "Yeah, that's me." His confession flips the whole vibe on its head. Karen storms in and tells him she's heard he's been hunting monsters, and they're finally going to have a real talk. As she says it, the forest flashes with the knights, and their captain quietly admits they're stretched thin, because the monster population needs cutting down. The scene snaps to the Adventurers Guild, where a staff member lays it all out. This isn't some shady shop, it's a state-run machine. Townspeople and merchants line up with requests to handle monsters on roads and in the fields, and that whole setup boosts national security while keeping adventurers busy with real work. Cyril lays it out for them. Foreignata, their domain, has nothing special to offer. It's sliding downhill fast, so adventurers won't even look their way. And that's why he tells them he's been the one cutting down the monsters. He listens while Karen digs in, insisting the danger of his work is exactly why they have to step in and ease the weight on his shoulders. Orca backs her up, nodding hard and throwing out the same fierce agreement. Orca leans in and starts explaining, her face dead serious as she tells Zexbro's worried about one thing: real fights come with zero guarantees. Cyril pauses and weighs it all, measuring the worth of field experience against the danger. Seeing his hesitation, Karen snaps the moment forward. She tells him that she and Orca are members of House Foreignata too, and begs her big brother to hear them, pleading to protect their people side by side. With sheer determination pushing him to the edge, he finally gives in. Cyril nods but slaps on hard rules. They can only show up when he calls, and they're banned from even getting close to the Adventurers Guild. Then he snaps into his adult adventurer persona, size, mask and all, and makes them swear they'll remember the disguise. Then he lays out their first game plan. He'll take the request at the guild while you and him wait by the town gate, and once that's done, you all regroup and dive straight into the forest. Their cheers erupt the moment his instructions land, and Karen and Orca shoot each other a high five, thanking him like he just saved the day, while he watches in silence, struck by how fast they're bonding, even if it feels way too soon. Their excitement lasts about 2 seconds. Then Orca spots the quest paper and explodes, realizing they got played. Cyril stays cool and explains the monster hunt board was completely empty, so he grabbed a fully legit gathering request instead. With everything finally settled, they march straight into the forest. Cyril, back in his younger form, spots the exact plant they need and lays out how to harvest it, while the girls scan the ground and realize the catch. These plants refuse to grow in clusters, so it's going to be brutal. He grins and tells them, "Don't worry, it's easy." Then drops a clue: every living thing, even plants, carries mana. With one burst of words, realization hits. Orca snaps into it and blurts out that every species has to have its own one-of-a-kind signature man. Karen slams her Manesite on, and in a blink her view of the forest warps. Everything around her dims while the plants she's hunting start glowing, soft but unmistakable, like they're calling her name. Her wind snaps a fierce focus onto her face. Right then, Orca's competitive streak lights up like fire. He declares he'll hunt down his own herbs and dares her to a showdown to see who can scoop up the most. She dives straight into the work, beaming as she yells that she's found a huge patch of herbs, then pointing out more growing here and there like it's a treasure hunt. Cyril watches her scan the clearing, then declares he'll take the other side. Just as the hearing kicks in, Karen snaps on alert, spotting a pack of gray wolves. She says there are 4, but Orca calmly corrects her. 5. Cyril's stunned, because Orca's detection is sharper than Karen's, even with Karen's longer training. He presses them, demanding to know if they've been sweeping the area with their mana to track monster packs. He snaps that they're missing something vital, and when Karen and Orca look down, he keeps right on teaching, telling them that their carelessness might slide today since he's here, but when they team up with others in the future, they'd better assign roles the right way. He glares at his own mistake, realizes they got so lost in collecting that they never kept watch, and the forest hits them like a warning bell. This place is lethal. With a calm, heavy final word, he tells them the gray wolves are seconds away from noticing they're there. With weapons out and eyes locked, Orca and Karen take their stance. Orca leans in and calls Cyril Onissima, begging for one shot to fix the mistake from before, while Karen jumps in, swears they'll do everything they can and tells Cyril, "My exi," to watch over them. With a calm smile, he nods along to their request and vows he'll still step in if things get too dangerous. With pure resolve blazing in their eyes, both girls shout, "Agreed." With Orca's nod, they thunder forward, and right away Orca clocks it. The wolf pack has split into 3 groups. Karen wastes no time, pushing a bold plan. Hit the center first so they don't get boxed in. Orca slams the approval, and he charges straight for the 2 wolves right in the middle. Karen takes matters into her own hands, fires off her suggestion as a blazing fire arrow spell, and the fiery shot slams into one of the wolves' heads, roaring the beast up in flames. As the last wolves slam in, the Orca snaps into a defensive counter. Ice erupts from the ground, hardens into a wall, and slams shut their attack path. From a safe distance, Cyril studies their teamwork like a hawk, realizing Orca's the support and Karen's the fire magic attacker, which makes the whole plan click. But before he can savor it, a lone wolf howls in the dark, screaming for reinforcements. His senses flare wide. He spots the danger barreling in. He estimates about 20 more enemies, and they're still just outside the girl's reach, but he tells himself it's fine if they don't notice, even as a grim truth claws at him. That many foes is way too much for them so soon. Before the new threat even gets close to the children, a thunderous shot cracks the air, right on target. The pack's lead wolf drops instantly, shredded by that unseen projectile as empty magical casings tumble and rattle onto the ground. The attack was all him. Cyril recalls when he could barely squeeze out one single shot, and now he unleashes as many as his mana will allow. He stares at the fallen wolves below, grinning, convinced that nothing hits harder than this spell. He stands over the fallen creatures, measuring his next move, and mutters that the spell's still too slow. He wants it to fire like a gun. Because the bullet's power scales with mana, he decides to crank up both the punch per shot and his total mana reserves. And deep down, he knows this is only the start. He can still push it even further. He stared as Orca threw a victory celebration, gloating that the last wolves were dead, then leaned in and fired a question at him. Had he been watching? Karen and Orca both snapped their eyes his way, waiting for his answer, right as the final beast sprawled and lay impaled on a magical stone spike. With Orca roaring in the background, Karen dropped to her knees by one of the fallen creatures, cupped her hands, and let a soft, ethereal glow spill out as she murmured a quiet prayer. Orca swung his gaze to him and asked, "Are we grabbing the magic stones from those beasts?" Then Karen broke it down, saying she'd take full responsibility for every life she'd taken, but she also admitted, "If this is too much for me, you can handle it." He just stared. Then it hit him hard. Karen had grown way faster and way further than he ever expected. As they trekked through the forest, he fired off compliments to both girls for their stronger magic, and you could tell he genuinely couldn't believe how far they'd come. Orca practically glowed with pride. Then, like it was nothing, he mentioned he'd already handled the reinforcements one of the wolves called in, and Karen and Orca froze like they'd just heard a ghost story. They demanded to know how he pulled it off without either of them noticing, but he only laughed, like it was the easiest thing in the world. Left still unshaken, Orca begged him to pass on his technique during their next hunt, and he nodded, swearing he'd keep a lesson ready for their next outing. From that day on, the 3 of them kept slipping out together to hunt magic beasts, sharpening their skills with every fight and getting stronger side by side, while Cyril started keeping a detailed written log of their progress and everything that happened along the way. The longer he stayed in this new world, the more his old game memories crumbled away. So he started scribbling everything down, entry after entry, until his notes stopped being mere records and turned into a full-blown political playbook, packed with reminders of what he had to do, like checking the territory's livestock. And even his first appearance is logged with tiny, personal milestones, like the day Karen finally rode a horse for the very first time. He let out a quiet chuckle as he added another entry, pinning the moment he caught Karen trying to sneak away the food she hated off her plate, then choosing to play dumb. And he realized right then His meticulous notes had turned into a full-blown parenting journal. He stared into the open book, jaw set, resolve burning hotter by the second, and the moment he'd been waiting for was finally right around the corner. Later, after he dragged Karen and Orca back home, unease hit him like a cold wave. Cheyenne smiled and welcomed him in, but he couldn't shake the gut feeling that something at the castle had gone wrong. Then Karen cut straight through it, demanding snacks and pushing them into their usual review session. His suspicion got nailed the moment Cheyenne slid in her report. The Northern Noble Alliance of the two kingdoms had kicked off a war, smashing Count Galbata and all three of his branch families. The news hit Orca like a punch to the chest. He stammered in horror, terrorizing the thought of his own family. Karen stared at the reality sinking in, while Cyril's expression turned ice-cold and grim. The disaster he'd predicted was finally here, right in front of them. Cheyenne drops a brutal report. Civil war has broken out in the Holy Kingdom's northeast, and Count Galbata with his three branched families has been hit. The news slams into Orca like a wrecking ball, and he finally realizes the nightmare is coming for his own family too. Beside him, Karen feels the air turn cold, then stares at her brother, Cyril, worried and tense. Later, during what should have been a cozy tea time, the tension still hangs in the air. Kara clocks her brother's distraction right away and demands to know why he's not eating a single bite. He leans in and tells Orca just how dire this is, confirming that his home, the Bayakudai barony, is ruled by one of the branch families that got hit. As he speaks, Cyril's mind slams the clues into place, snapping the chaos straight to the game's story he remembers. And then it clicks. This showdown isn't random at all. It's the final payoff of years of plotting by the monotheistic Fuensole family, who have been trying to wipe out the polytheistic Galbatis for ages. He remembers this war as the turning point of the whole story, one that doesn't just hit Orca hard, but shakes up a whole lineup of major characters too. Cyril wrestled with what to do next, trying to stop Karen from dying, though it had nothing to do with this civil war at all. If he stepped in, he'd make enemies of the monotheists, and they could come hunting Karen the moment they learned about her light attribute. But if he helped the Galbata family directly, it would basically scream war and drag the royal family into it, leaving his own house sitting in the crossfire. In the end, he decided straight-up involvement was just too dangerous. He snaps out a cold, calculating line, saying the Bayakudai barony is just too far off to matter. Karen stares in disbelief as he's basically gaslighting his own name. Orca, though, squeezes out a smile, tail twitching like it can't decide whether to flee, insisting he gets it and that Cyril is right. She snaps right in front of her brother, her voice slicing through the air with pure rage. "How can you say that?" And she fires back that Orca's family could die. Orca tries to calm the storm, urging Cyril not to worry, claiming his father and brother already warned him this was coming. "I'm fine," he insists, but the tension in his face screams the truth. Overwhelmed, Orca blurts an apology to Karen, yanks the plug on their study session, and bolts up the grand staircase shouting that he'll be in his room. Then, in the chaos, Karen trips and crashes to the floor, while Cyril yells for Orca to wait, but he's already vanished. His gaze turns icy as he snaps his head toward Cheyenne. He barks that his spies need to crank it up, but makes one thing crystal clear: nobody is allowed to interfere directly. Cheyenne locks eyes with him and fires back, quiet but deadly. "Are you sure?" Her voice ricochets through the now empty hall, sealing her command. "Yes, of course," she replies, "exactly as you asked." Night drapes the estate in shadow, and the room falls dark. Only a thin ribbon of moonlight slips through the window. He flops onto his bed and drains every last ounce of energy with one exhausted sigh, while Orca stays hunched nearby, spiraling over the fact that he already saw this coming, and still can't believe it's only hitting him now. His brain spins with ruthless calculation. Ditch Orca's family. Let history play out exactly like the game in his head, and he can nearly lock in Karen's safety, a grim choice, but it makes perfect sense. With a rush of pure frustration, he snaps bolt upright and fires off curses at the mess. Across from him, Orca looks up, his face twisted with pain but steady in resignation, telling Cyril he already saw this coming and that he's fine. He pauses to steady his thoughts, staring at how his mental magic lets him lock his emotions down, even as his adult mind is trapped inside a kid's body. And yeah, the whole thing feels humiliating, because he can't shake the nagging thought that a real protagonist wouldn't be haunted by doubts like this. Still rattled, he decides T will steady his nerves, slips out of bed, then swings toward the door, apologizing for the late hour and firing off. What's going on? Karen and Cheyenne stood in the doorway, Karen in a plain nightgown, with wide, worried eyes as she looked up at him and gently called his name. In this quiet room, Karen sips from her teacup, then pushes it towards Cyril and tells him it's chamomile, so he can finally shut his eyes and fall asleep. In his lavish chambers, she leans in and spills the real reason she came so late. She wants to talk about Orca's true family, the Bakudai barony. Cyril, worn out, just asks her straight, why? She drops her gaze to the table, pleads straight from the heart, and demands that he send help to them right now in the middle of their fight. With a pained face, he watches Orca try to force a tired smile, and it breaks his heart, because he knows they can't let their emotions drive them. If they do, their family would instantly hemorrhage every political ally they've got. He keeps pushing, reminding her that right now he's sitting on the de facto power of the Fornata family, and with that power comes one job: protecting their land. He presses, asking if she's really willing to risk their people. Under the weight of it all, Karen finally gives in, defeated, and quietly admits he's right. His cool, confident mask slips for a second, and the sheer weight on his chest shows. He admits to himself that Karen's expectations are crushing him, and he can't take it anymore. She won't back down. She fires off the hard question. Does he realize that calling reinforcements could get their own knights killed, and is he really ready to own what happens? She reminds him he promised to help earlier. Even as she admits that, as the acting lord, she can't let their family get hurt, Orc's pained, half-smile clings to her thoughts, and she can't shake the feeling that she's searching for excuses. Her voice turns gentle as she digs up the memory. She admits that the day he carried her home, she was crushed by sorrow and guilt, convinced she'd been messing everything up and dragging him into trouble, and that feeling was eating her alive from the inside. He snaps his head up, stunned by her confession. Then she keeps going, reminding him he never blamed her and that he still taught her a lesson. Siblings don't just share blood, they back each other. She drives her last point home, staring him straight in the eyes and demanding, so that lesson was all a lie. Then she reminds him Orca is their beloved little brother. Cyril goes completely numb and silent until the moment that image hits his mind. The three of them holding hands. Her last words stayed hanging in the air like a steel ultimatum. If he didn't help, she'd leave, and she made it crystal clear. She would go rescue Orca's family all on her own. Karen spun around and strode for the door. While Cyril shouted for her to wait, she brushed him off, excused herself, and disappeared, leaving him stranded in the room. He collapsed onto the floor, slamming out a defeated sigh, then curled up on the ground, staring at his own choices like they'd betrayed him, asking himself why he even kept going. He covered his face with his hand, and finally admitted to himself that he'd been lashing out, dumping his own buried anxieties onto Karen. A sudden snap of understanding hit him. She wasn't just someone familiar, she was his little sister. And as her older brother, it was his job to stay one step ahead of the world's cruelty, to keep the truth away from their younger girls. His resolve hardened, and he tracked Cheyenne down in the hallway, then started spilling everything about Karen, only for the maid to calmly cut him off and reveal she already knew. He spun around, said nothing more, and strode down the long, dark corridor like he owned the night. Cheyenne kept right on his heels, sensing the urgency hit him like a storm. He slammed on the brakes and shouted for Cheyenne, saying they were calling an immediate strategy meeting to rescue Baron Bakodai and his family, right now. He ordered her to fetch every key person and sent another maid to round them up, making it crystal clear that time wasn't on their side. He lays out his plan and fires a shocking first command at Cheyenne. Go tell the royal palace about Karen's light magic, and it blindsides her so hard her eyes go wide, struggling to even understand what he just ordered. While the head of the house and his wife show zero interest in their own domain, the burden of a mountain of paperwork gets shoved onto everyone else, and the power to make the calls is handed to them too. In a grand study, Sue's works crackle with life as a senior nobleman grinds through his duties at his desk, annoyed that once Caroline was exposed as his saintess, the old generation's cruel policies are back with a vengeance. Beside him, young Cyril stays hunched over a smaller desk, laser-focused on his own work. Then bam! A sharp knock slams the door. The man snaps his gaze upward as the door creaks open. Then Cyril steps into the doorway, stares up at him, and asks for just a moment. Then he leans in and calls the guy Suishan like he's known him forever. And Cyril flashes a determined grin, ready to strike a deal. Moments later, he strides into a huge meeting room, and the second he steps in, surprise hits his face. Cheyenne by the door blurts that he's the last one here. Inside, a whole council of men is already packed around a long table, and Cyril can't stop his confusion, because in his head, he's sure everyone was done with work for the day. Without even being asked, a council member steps forward and addresses him with respect, saying they'd already counted on Lord Zex to smash through and send troops. Sitting at the head of the table, Cyril feels Sui's looming behind him, firing off questions about why he made that call. And Cyril just answers cool as ice, saying he already explained himself and sees no reason to send aid. From his high seat, he declares the only smart move is staying out of internal fights. Sui's kept going, voice locked in and unshaken, because we still remember the Lord's ex from that day. He leans in, eyes locked, and shoots Cyril a hard stare, asking what he thinks he's doing, like he's just a useless 6-year-old with zero power. Then Sua fires back, making it crystal clear. They're not about to let a kid's budget reform plan slide through. He finally admitted to himself that he had no power left, but with that Fornidata blood running through him, he could still make the call. Yeah, even a 5-year-old could see that. So he stood before the council again, and as Sue got up and mocked him, she demanded what he'd do next, run to his father. Cyril stayed unshaken, admitting his first move was compromise and USTUPKAA, but now, the choice finally landed in his hands. Then he dropped his revised proposal on the table. No more old customs. He'd offer compensation instead, and he urged them to speak up if they hated the idea, promising he genuinely wanted their opinions and begging them to trust him and his parents. His words hit hard. A clerk in a striped robe marched up to his desk, slapped a public investment list in front of him, and warned that it was sorted by importance, then told Cyril to follow it. Cyril just nodded and thanked him. As he snatched the document, his sharp eyes spotted a glaring discrepancy. He jabbed at a specific entry and slammed it shut. Fraudulent budget processing had been going on for years. The clerk jolted with shock and swore he'd take the master there right away, but Cyril already knew the truth. They'd been turning a blind eye to this injustice. He stewed on it, realizing they couldn't reform with empty hands, yet if they kept pretending not to see, he'd deal with them when the moment hit. Sue just stood there, calm as ever, and asked one thing. So, is this acceptable? Meanwhile, out in the training yard, the guard captain battered Dan with brutal sparring, and every time their wooden blades collided, the shockwaves rang out, hard enough to crack a nearby stone pillar. From a nearby doorway, a thrilled Karen burst into cheers, yelling that her big brother should give it everything, while the guard captain puffed up, flexed those arm muscles for the kids, and bragged that his strength was straight-up proof that he taught them right. Inspired, Dan whipped into a dramatic stance with his wooden sword, swearing he'd show Lady Caroline just how cool he could be. And from the side, Cyril's cheeks heated up with a shy flush. From a high window that framed the yard below, Sue watched every second, then leaned out and bellowed at the brats, urging them to go for it, and even promised she'd slip in a fine wine for dinner if they somehow lost. Because of what he did, Cyril ended up alone, staring at the mess he'd made and weighing every consequence. Step by step, he started steering the council members forward, Sue right beside him, until they marched straight toward his goal. He leaned in and told the guard captain straight up that he'd prove, no doubt, that he deserved the trust to safeguard Forlunata's future. Later, Sue fired back at Cyril's audacity, shocked he'd even dare use Orca's family like a bargaining chip. Cyril claimed he did it for his sister's sake. Across the room, Cyril still sat there, jaw tight, asking if it was really okay for him to let something so personal steer his decisions. The council members had already locked in their choice and declared their full trust in it. Cyril understood it wasn't that simple, at least not in his own head, but he swallowed the doubt, flashed a determined smile, and accepted their help, thanking them like he meant it, vowing to turn their strength into power. His grip on strength tightens, and right away his mind dives into the nuts and bolts of the plan. He weighs the brutal trip to the Bayakudai territory, a whole month by carriage, then blurts out the worry. Do we even make it? From her bed, Karen answers like a spark of hope. She'll use her light magic there. That suggestion blindsided him. Using Karen's light magic right now felt downright shocking, and the stunned council members around the table echoed the same disbelief. The council exploded into protest, screaming, "When did you find this out, and why weren't we told?" They insisted the shock was too sudden to manage in-house, but right in the middle of all that chaos, Cyril stayed stone calm. He then turned to the frantic council, voice steady, and told them the truth, that his trunk hard was way more powerful than they ever imagined, until they erupted, shouting his name like it was pure magic. Once the councils finally grudgingly signed off, the long journey kicked into gear. Outside the estate's towering stone walls, the main gate exploded with noise as wagons rolled in. Horses pawed the ground, and everyone shouted over the chaos, all set for that month-long trek to Bayakudai territory.